Sorry for the delay.
I don't forgive you, but there's nothing I can do about it, so you're off the hook. Thought Bat, and what are you, Board Connect?
Yes.
What are we doing? What is this?
Tope, would you like to explain? Because I have to set up some stuff.
Yeah, fair enough. Kanak will be listening, so he can correct any thing he thinks I've said wrong. So last Saturday, Board Kanak and I had not quite a debate, more of a conversation. Previous to last Saturday, Kanak had a conversation with Liquid Zulu, who you know, and they went through anarcho-capitalism and such, and that was all fun and games. And so I thought I would present my version of anarchism to Board Kanak. And so last Saturday we had that conversation. The format is basically me just explaining the position, and then Board Kanak will ask questions, critiquing it here and there. Now, I think Board Kanak will probably agree that the conversation didn't go as it should have done. Things got a little bit heated, especially from my side. I was frustrated with certain aspects of his behavior, or at least what I feel to be aspects of his behavior. And so we agreed to do a second debate or a second conversation. The reason being because I think there's still points that have been left unchecked and we want to go through them. I want to make sure that I'm not leaving Board Kanak with some negative impression of me based on the events of that stream. And Board Kanak wanted a moderator, and I said, well, Sunday's pretty good at that. He's done it before. I'm on good terms with Sunday, so yep, just ask Sunday, see if he's free, and you were free. So here we are.
Sweet. Okay. Well, I am going to be playing chess during this, so I apologize in advance. But I will moderate and keep you two grown adults pretending to be such for a brief period of time that you're on my stream. Okay.
That's a very difficult task.
Yeah, it historically has been. So I'm going to give you lot. 5-minute openers sound fine?
Do you need openers, Board?
Do you need openers?
Maybe a small
I
one.
don't think so.
I just wanna ask Sunday. I mean, you are going to listen, right?
Oh yes, I'm always listening.
Okay. So yeah, I guess 5-minute openers is more than enough, I think.
All right.
Just
well, in that case,
yeah.
Go on.
Since the whole format is me presenting my case, I think I'll just go presenting my case. Is that all right with you, Board?
Sure.
Go for it.
Yeah, okay. So basically, I wanted to offer a slightly different version of anarchism to Liquid Zulu. Liquid Zulu is an anarcho-capitalist, and he's a moral realist. I'm a moral anti-realist, specifically an error theorist, and I am an anarcho-mutualist who is also a legal positivist. Liquid Zulu is a natural law theorist. I'm a legal positivist. I don't believe ethics and law are the same thing. I think
that was short. I'm glad we've already determined that you lost. Stop that. Well done. Continue.
There we go. Yeah, so I'm not a natural law theorist. I'm happy saying that law is a separate thing from ethics. You can think of laws which are justified or non-justified, and maybe law can be an application of ethics, but law and ethics are not the same question. So the model I propose is a polycentric legal system whereby there's no monopoly on law determination across a given territory, i.e. a state, and instead law, or if you're like a more radical anarchist, you don't like the word law, conflict resolution is done through a polycentric network of rights enforcement agencies, or what we call legal regimes, which are non-territorial and offering services on a market, if you will, saying, right, here's your rights, here's what we're going to protect you against, here's what we won't. And that is where I leave it, and that's where I let Board Kanak ask his questions.
Sure. Hang on, sorry, you wait. I'm moderating Board asking questions, just for clarification.
Yeah, the conversation going on from now.
Okay.
Unless Board has got a 5-minute open, I don't know.
I mean, no, I don't want to make it more boring than it already is, but so the first thing that we're trying to establish is what the difference is between your system and an anarcho-capitalist system. And the way I understand it, the biggest difference is that the theory of what is whom's property is basically not objective, but is also not a consensus that we get from society. So the biggest problem that I have with your system is that we don't know who owns what, and that is also the reason why we even construct a system in the first place. So if two people have a disagreement on who owns what, that's the thing we're trying to basically fix, and we're trying to get a decision who owns what. And I feel like in your system it is not possible to get even slightly better than them just hitting over each other's head with a stick and the stronger one winning. That is my main objection with your system. And I feel like all the things that you're proposing to solve this issue basically fail. That's my opening statement, I guess.
All right.
Okie dokie. So
Okay.
let's go with the problem of who owns what. You're using the word ownership there, which is implying some kind of property right. Now, in our first conversation, I highlighted that I used 3 centers of the word property. There's property the legal, which is what the law says you own. There's property the ethical, which is what you should be allowed to own. And then there's property the actual, which is what do you actually have control over. So there's 3 different senses of the word property there. So I raised this, and he said he didn't. And in the previous conversation, he said he didn't understand or didn't acknowledge the distinctions there. But in my worldview, those distinctions are very, very important, especially if you're establishing who owns what. Well, are we talking the ethical sense, or are we talking about the legal sense?
I don't think that these are important at all. Like, all of these distinctions are not important at all, because that's also the thing that I would
Man
like to
after
improve.
my own heart. Go on.
Sorry, come again,
Sorry.
Sunday?
You're all good. Keep going.
Okay. So this is all not important. The thing that we can agree upon, and we can just go from there. We don't even have to get into ethics, because I think, like, since you're an egoist, basically you don't have any ethics. There is no ethics in the sense that everybody else would understand ethics. So therefore, I don't think we should even go into ethics. We can just agree on one thing, and I hope you will agree with that, because there will be at least a stance that I would get from you, that the status quo, basically the raw version of how nature is bad. That's the thing we can, let's not even say bad, because that would imply some form of ethics. Let's just say we don't want the base version of nature, where the person that is stronger gets to keep the stick and we can do nothing about it. Okay, that's the thing that we don't want. And so therefore we're coming up with systems. Liquid Zulu comes up with NAP, you come up with your system, and I come up with social democracy and a state, right? So basically that's the thing that we want to avoid. That situation where basically just the stronger one gets to hit the weaker one over the head and gets to take the thing. Is that correct? Is that also why you are creating your system, or are we missing something here?
Well, I'm noticing that you've got a motivational normative property in what you're saying this is something that we want to avoid, right? That is implying either some desire, or is it implying either some ethical obligation? Now, this is why I say law and ethics need to be separate conversations. Now, I do have an ethical system. Hold
I
on.
don't care.
Okay, now you don't care. That's fine. But we're talking about my worldview, and I'm trying to explain my worldview to you.
I'm trying
it's
to.
my worldview.
I'm trying to not.
Moderator, I'm being interrupted.
All right, Kanek, give him 5 seconds. Go.
Okay.
Thank you. Right. So, thing is, we're debating my worldview. I'm just trying to explain my worldview, and so what I need to do is say, well, hold on. There's a legal sense and there's an ethical sense. As an egoist, I do have an ethical system, and there are cases where I'll say, well, the law says A owns B, but I would say A shouldn't own B. For example, we have landlordism, we have capitalism, we have a completely different system of ownership in place right now in law, which I ethically disagree with. Right? Now, my ethics is I'm coming from an error theorist model, but I'm a fictionalist, so I construct my own preferred ethical system. But that is a different question to how law works. Now, on to the problem of we want to avoid whoever has the best stick, the biggest stick winning out, determining who gets to own what. Well, in the legal sense, and this is what I said the last time, this is going to be the case anyway. To have any kind of law, to have any kind of property rights enforced, you need to have the biggest stick. Social democracy, anarchism, communism, you name it, you need to have a sufficient legal force to enforce that property right. Otherwise, legally, you don't have that property. In the ethical sense, there's a distinction, right? So we're talking about, okay, we're now working out based on agreed ethical norms about property, who should own what. So that is why those are two completely different questions.
What's the intended audience for this debate? Just out of curiosity.
That doesn't
I have
matter.
no
President Sunday, don't
My-
please,
my-
please. Like, I know it's boring, but if you agree to do the debate, please don't derail it as well, because he's already derailing it. And if you do it as well, then it's.
I had to shut
so
you up already, buddy. Don't test me.
I'm just telling you my opinion. That's the way it is. So, the reason why I'm saying it is not important, why you don't want this, is because we have to start somewhere, right? So, and I think that you want your system to be applied in any case. Like, you want your system to be societally applied, and you wanting that implies that you don't want the state that is there without your system. So it is not important whatsoever why you don't want that state of nature. So I don't even care what the distinction is between your ethical reasons and your. I don't even know what that means, since you're an egoist. To me, it doesn't make any sense, and it would take a lot of time. I think another discussion like that to even find out, to make sense of your ethics.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think we can just make things shorter, because you want your system to be broadly applied. So why do we even care why you want this to be applied? It's not like if you would have cases where if you would say, okay, I want it applied in some cases, I don't want my system in other cases, then we could say, okay, let's explore it. But since you want it broadly, we don't care.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to stress that we do not jumble ethics and law.
Sunday, do you see what
is on
my point?
No. You want to restate that in English?
Yes.
Can I make my point?
Please.
Or
No, I'm good. I want to hear this. Actually, we're involving me apparently, because I'm not moderating a debate, so I want to hear what he's saying.
Okay. So I'm asking him. The first question that I'm asking is, are you also engaged in trying to remove this state of nature where the one with the bigger stick or the one that is stronger just gets the property? Might makes right, basically. Are you?
There is no property. There's no property in a state of nature. Why would you even presume the question makes sense?
Okay, you can rephrase it like that, but at the end of the day,
there's literally no property in a state of nature. It's a state of nature. It's pre-property. So what are we talking about?
I mean, we're talking about
it's what property. There's no.
We're talking about ownership and possession being the same thing, basically.
Yeah, exactly. There's no property to possess. There's no reason to have a stick.
Okay. Then
is that vis-a-vis concordantly? The question presumes an absurd situation.
Sure,
yeah.
you can formulate it that way. But then my question is,
I'm not formulating it that way. It's just a fact.
Okay, Sunday, it's all right.
Go on.
Is your motivation for your system, for the thing that you're trying to establish, is the motivation to instate something that is called property? Right? Where basically
my system, or are you talking about ThoughtBat system?
ThoughtBat system. That is my question to ThoughtBat. So is his motivation, for example, the NAP is basically there. The reason why Liquid Zulu wants a society that follows the principle of NAP is because he wants property to exist, and he wants his property rights to be respected, and he doesn't want someone to take his stick, and he doesn't want anyone's stick to be taken away from them, right? That's the thing he wants. And I'm asking ThoughtBat if he's coming from the same place, if he also doesn't want that.
So I'm still not quite.
Sorry, ThoughtBat. Sunday, did you understand me? Did you understand the question?
I thought you were talking to Wig. Now you're addressing me. I'm very confused.
You didn't understand the question that I'm asking ThoughtBat?
No, I didn't understand it either.
Can you say it again? It's complicated stuff. Sometimes people don't understand.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a state of nature, right?
Okay.
In which the person that is stronger possesses the stick, and we can't do anything about it. That's the state of nature.
Okay.
my motivation for putting in society and property rights and property laws, and also Liquid Zulu's motivation for putting in the NAP principle, for making the NAP principle apply, etc.
You're an anarcho-capitalist.
No,
like
I'm not. No, I'm not.
Oh,
I'm not. I'm just stating that the thing that we all have in common is that we want to abolish that state of nature where the stronger one just possesses the stick.
No. Because here's the
You can disagree with that, bro. You can disagree with that, but can you just that is the question. You can disagree with my question,
but there's a reason why I'm disagreeing with the framing of the question, because you preloaded the answer in the question. If you agree that the state of nature already involves things like property, for example, it's going to follow as a matter of course that you're going to need a particular system that allocates property rights and defends them, and so on and so forth, despite like power imbalances. But if that's not the case and there is no property, then you don't necessarily need that. And most anarchist arguments actually have a different view of what the state of nature entails.
I don't need the word property to explain what I'm describing. We don't want
the premise of the stronger getting the stuff because they have the bigger stick was that there was property that they were able to obtain, right?
They get the possession of that stick. That is not the same thing as owning the stick.
The stronger person gets the possession of the stick. I'm sorry, you lost me.
Taking the stick and owning the stick are two different things, right?
I feel like, as I say, epic rap battles where Austin Powers is like, "Can I get in my rap, please?"
Hang on, but why do you think so? Taking possession and owning are different. Why do you think so?
I mean, it is in our current.
What is the difference? Explain.
Me taking your stick.
Yes.
Is me.
What makes it my stick if you have taken it? What magical property has been conferred to the stick?
In our property law, it would still be your stick because I've just stolen it. I've not. So in our current framing, in our current society, in our current way of understanding law, I'm not the owner of the stick.
But we're talking about a state of nature, though.
Exactly. Right? And in the state of nature, there is no second layer basically that could have a different judgment. There is basically just the one layer, which is possession, right?
Right. Sure.
Exactly. And the motivation for having a law, basically, and law and property rights and society and the state, if you want the state, right? All of the motivation for that is to have the second layer.
No, that's circular.
Why is that circular? Can you explain why that's circular?
It's circular because the intention behind having the law presumes the thing that the law creates. Property. You don't have property in that sense unless you already have law. So it doesn't work.
That's an objection. That's an okay objection. I don't think that's true. I think that's bullshit. But did you understand the question that I'm asking ThoughtBat?
Were you asking ThoughtBat the same question?
Yes. The question is, why is he putting his system in place? Why are you putting? What's your favorite state? Do you want a state, Sunday? Do you want the state to exist?
I'm kind of ambivalent about it.
Who are we debating here?
No,
I don't know.
It's a simple yes or no question, right? So if you want a state, then the question is, why do you want a state, right? And I think most people, me included, would say we want the state to avoid nature, the way it is in nature, where there is no rules and there's no law, etc.
No, that doesn't factor into my concerns at all.
Sure.
I want a state to be there because I've got a whole lot of material goods riding on a particular bureaucratic structure remaining functioning. That's why I want a state.
Sure, but that's also not having the Wild West, right?
I'll wait patiently, guys.
Wild West isn't on the menu is the problem. That's not a thing. Incidentally, there is no Wild West unless you have an invading colonial power.
Okay, that's a position. Yeah. That's a position. Okay, I think that's not true.
A fact,
but sure. But basically, that was my question to ThoughtBat. And now, you understood my question? And do you now understand why it is irrelevant? Why he wants that state to
You're
not exist?
You're going to kill me, but I'm going to be honest with you. I still don't understand your question, actually.
How can you still not understand it? That doesn't seem believable to me.
I'm just lucky, I guess.
Okay.
The question's also changed, by the way. You were talking about going away. How does this go from take us out of the state of nature whereby the biggest stick, man with the biggest stick wins out in the property right and such? You're saying, how does your system do that? Well, my point being is it doesn't. No situation stop being the case. You're interrupting, I'm still talking.
Sorry.
And so no situation does that not be the case. If you have a state, if you have a communist dictatorship of the proletariat, if you have a feudal system, whatever you want, whatever governmental system you have, that governmental system needs to have the necessary manpower to enforce property rights. So it's always going to be the case that property is determined who has got the biggest stick in the legal sense. Now, in the ethical sense, we can talk about who should own what, who should have the right to control what. That's a different conversation to how do we stop people from getting the stick through force, right? The force part is baked into the legal sense. This is why I separate law and ethics.
Nonetheless, you want a state to intervene. You want your system to prevent that state where it's just might makes right. That's the thing that your system tries to avoid, right? And you saying
no.
Okay, then that's an answer to that, right? Because then you're basically saying your answer to that question. So you understood my question.
Wait, hang on. Did he say yes? I didn't actually catch what he said.
Okay.
So
he's saying might makes right is always the case. Can I steelman your case? Can I steelman your position? So maybe
go ahead.
Okay. So he says that basically no, he's not avoiding he's not avoiding might makes right. That's not his motivation, because he believes that might makes right is always the case, because you always need might to even enforce property law.
Does he believe?
Theory.
Oh, hang on. Did he say that? Thought do you agree that might always makes right because you need might in order to enforce property?
Wait, right. Did I steelman you correctly?
So hold on. So to the same question. So I say that might makes right only in the sense of law, not in the sense of ethics. I'm not saying that if you have the might, therefore there is some normative statement that you should be allowed to do what you want. What I'm saying is, in the legal sense, what the law is, what the law says you have a property right to, is determined by who has the biggest stick, no matter what. No matter what situation, that will be the case. You need to have manpower, you need to have force to enforce any given law. That's what law is. It's an enforced social norm. Now, might doesn't make right in the ethical sense, because me being stronger than you doesn't reify the moral value of my actions. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying might makes right is something that we cannot avoid in the legal sense.
Okay, and I'm saying my counter to that is that in our current system, might is a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition. So you need might to enforce the law, but it's not enough to just have the power to do so. That's why the president can just take anything he wants, right?
Guess again.
Well, yeah, guess
again. Theoretically. Theoretically, but that's...
So imagine we've got... So can I respond to that? So and this is why I'm going to compartmentalize the conversation. We're sticking to law at the moment. In the legal sense, say you're in Germany, and you are in Germany. That's public information. I didn't just dox you then. We
found him, guys.
We found him.
Sorry, go on.
We got him. So yeah, in Germany, imagine if there is a communist revolution and they have a civil war with the German government and they win. What else was needed other than the might of the revolutionary force to have their laws imposed on Germany?
Sorry, if a foreign power would invade Germany, you mean?
No. So you got Germany, right?
Yeah.
Within Germany, there is a communist revolution.
Stop that. Listen. Try your analogy again. Avoid proper nouns.
Avoid proper nouns?
Avoid proper nouns.
Okay. Fuck, I've forgotten what proper noun is. So, in Germany, we've got... Your face. In Germany...
I give up.
Oh, I love doing this. In Germany, there's some external force or internal force that overpowers the German government. As in, the German government hasn't got the resources, hasn't got the manpower to fight off this hostile force, either within or without. Foreign power, internal power, doesn't really make a difference. So we've got a power that has the might, and the might outweighs that of the current German government. What else is needed to have their laws enforced?
My understanding of what is legal is consensus and democracy. So there has to be some consensus in order for me to say that is legal. And obviously that comes with the might as well. But we are not asking, you're not, the thing that is in question is not my system. The thing that is in question is your system. So the thing that we're asking ourselves is, if we have a conflict between two parties over a scarce good, how does your system solve this conflict? My system, our current system, does solve that. Okay? But it's not in question what the principles of our current system are. It's in question of how will your system and how will your proposals, your political proposals, how will they solve this conflict? So we have two parties, right? And they have different opinions about who should own a certain object. How does your system solve this conflict?
Yep, before we start talking about that, we need to address a point that you made. And so we went down this path because you said, oh, well, how do you avoid my... I hear you laughing, but this is an important point.
Yeah, but because
you said,
like
you think... Excuse me, you're interrupting. Yeah. So you said... You done?
Go ahead.
So you said, this is a problem with Thorbac's system because he says in law, might makes right. He says there's something else that we need to have. We need to have consensus. So he's implying that I'm wrong for some reason for saying to have legal rights, you only need to have force. Now he says, oh, you need to have consensus as well. Was that the case in the Soviet Union when only 5% of the population actually supported the Bolshevik regime at the given time? Is it the case in any given society, any given population, that the political system of the day is necessarily a consensus-based system? What about all the feudal states that we've had in the past? Well, not technically states. Sunday would be quick to jump in and correct me. But what about the feudal kingdoms that we had in the past? Were they consensus-based? No, but their laws are enforced anyway.
Keep going.
Mark Weber and all
I don't really care. It's all good. Continue.
Dude. It's all good. Anyways, but board.
Yeah.
You said that. Hold on. You said to me, as if it was a flaw on my part, that I'm neglecting some magical thing called consensus. Now, consensus, for me, and I think for anyone, doesn't play diddly squat if the power without consensus support is able to enforce laws with physical force.
You done?
I am done now.
Okay. First of all, I'm not saying at all that every society in the world is based on this principle. And I'm just telling you what my opinion is, what my position is on what's legal and what's illegal. So, but at some point we have to stop talking about what my position is of what's legal and what's illegal and how I would solve conflict and how my ideal society would solve conflict. At some point we have to start talking about your society, how your society would solve it, because that's the topic of the whole thing that we're doing. And I feel like you're trying to do everything that you can to not talk about this. And it's a simple question. Currently, we have means to solve this conflict. How would your system solve this conflict? That's the thing that we should.
Conflict, just for hang on, Thorbach. Yeah. The conflict, just for clarification, being violence in the state of nature.
Yeah, let me make it a little bit more specific. Maybe, for example, I think Thorbach believes in property rights based on use.
It's an unaddressed point, by the way.
You have talked about this in the past. I just give it as an example what could be a guiding principle in his system. Let's say two people have differing opinions on what.
I feel like you're specifying the point of losing the point of the question. Thorbach, do you agree that do you agree that the state of nature is a Hobbesian war of all against all?
I'm not a Hobbesian. No, I don't believe. Do
you believe the state of nature is inherently violent?
No.
Okay, dude, well then the question is not to Thorbach because he doesn't assent to that premise, right?
Why do you... That's not the question at all. That's not the question at all.
I'm going to put your question... No, I'm going to put your question right back to you. You asked, how do you solve this problem? He doesn't agree that the problem exists. Therefore, you're asking the question to someone who doesn't believe the problem exists.
He doesn't believe that in his... So he's advocating for a political change, right? Thorbach, you advocate for a political change, right?
Are you advocating for a political change?
Yeah, I'm advocating for a political change if getting rid of the government is, or resisting the government, or not supporting the government is a political change. Yeah.
I really wish you just said no. Yeah, go on.
Sure. So he is advocating for a political change. Does this political change apply to the real world, actual real world that we're actually living in? Yes. Do we have scarce conflicts over scarce good? Yes. So he doesn't have to agree to the premise because.
Name one.
Sorry?
Name one.
Name one what?
Conflicts over scarce goods. Name one.
You don't believe that there is conflicts over scarce goods?
I just want to know if you can name one.
Okay, I can't. Do you want to Sunday? Do you want to derail this conversation? Like, what the fuck? So he doesn't have to agree with any premise because we already know that there is conflicts over scarce goods. So, and since he's advocating for a political change, he needs to provide a solution to an existing problem in his system that he proposes.
Well, hang on, but here's the problem.
do that.
You changed lanes from talking about the state of nature to talking about conflicts over scarce goods. What goods are scarce in the state of nature?
The stick that two people want to use.
The forest is full of sticks. You just get another stick.
Okay, you don't believe that this can exist, right? Is that what you're saying, Sunday?
No, I'm a stick realist. I believe sticks exist.
No, do you don't believe that conflicts over sticks can exist?
Why would there be a conflict over? Why would there be conflicts over sticks if sticks are plentiful? The premise again is scarcity.
Dude, are you
Sunday?
trolling?
There's a way that let me just try and explain that because I know what.
No, wait.
I know what Kanak is getting at.
No,
Hold on,
I want to finish this.
Sunday better. I can explain it to Sunday better, right?
Okay.
So Sunday, you've had a conversation with Liquid Zulu in the past where he's talking about sticks, and if I break off a stick, and then you fashion it into a spear, whatever, and you want to stoke your fire with it, and then I want to use that same stick that you've got in your hand to go spearfish, and when we have a fight over it and stuff. So Kanak is asking, how is this solved? If not, the one with the biggest stick or the one with the most might wins out. Does that make sense?
I don't see how this relates to the problem he was talking about.
Bro, doesn't matter. Do you believe? Okay, wait. No. This is getting ridiculous. Do you believe that conflicts over scarce goods exist today in this world, Sunday?
Well, I do. I just don't know if you
okay.
do. I asked you for an example.
I do.
And you couldn't think of one.
No, I can't think of one, but I still believe in it.
Well,
yeah?
Please share.
Okay. What should I share?
What do you think you should share?
I don't know. What should I share? Yeah, I already told you that I can't come up with an example.
You said you thought of one, so
I just believe it. I can't come up with an example, but I just believe it. Okay. Do you believe it? You also believe it. Great. Thoughtbat, do you believe it? That there is conflicts over scarce good in our world currently?
I believe there's conflicts over scarce goods.
Awesome. So we are all in agreement. Action. Wonderful. Awesome. So now we can move on from that. And you're advocating for political change since we have a problem in our current society and our current system is dealing with this problem more or less successfully. You have a different system. You're advocating for political change. And I'm asking you, how would this problem be dealt with in your system? Is that too much to ask, Sunday? Is that a
How did you not just say real estate? I'm so confused.
There's an assumption.
Is that...
Sorry, go on.
There's an assumption based. What criteria of success are you using?
Sorry?
You said our system does this successfully. What criterion of success are you using?
I said more or less successfully, so it is debatable. It depends,
more or less,
obviously.
more or less.
It decides.
What criterion of success are you going for?
Yeah. So it decides. It provides us with the decision of who owns the property, the good. It provides us with an answer.
Problem is though, is you've now got a stick sharpening industry in Thoughtbat's example. So you're not dealing with the state of nature anymore. You've got industry going on. You've got
what
economic relationship.
What?
Production.
Yeah. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you're not in a state of nature anymore, buddy. You've got
Bro,
society.
what are you talking about? Forget about nature. It's a very simple thing that we're going from. Like we're starting from something very simple. We have a problem in our current society. He's advocating for political change. How would
we all deny that the problem exists? So you just keep it.
No, you all agreed that the problem exists. You all agreed that there is
problem of scarcity, not a state of nature.
No,
I don't.
We all agreed in our current society. We all agreed that there is conflict over scarce goods. The three of us just
but not
agreed.
over necessary scarce goods. Typically, it's over things like real estate and so on and so forth.
That doesn't matter.
We're not talking about people. Beg your pardon?
That doesn't matter. It exists, right? And I'm asking.
It exists between states. Systems of law don't solve that.
You don't think that it exists between people?
Not in a political way. We don't duel over land typically. The closest example I can think of would be the people getting pushed out of their homes in the West Bank.
If we would take away in situations where law enforcement and the law is basically taken out. For example, in war, don't we have conflicts like that popping up out of nowhere all the time? People
They're
looting.
popping up out of nowhere.
Looting.
You just said the context was war.
Wait, looting?
Looting's
that not a
conflict
thing?
over scarce. Looting's not a conflict over scarce goods. Looting is looting.
How is that not infringing on someone's property rights?
Infringing on someone's property rights does not mean the motivation is scarcity.
But do you know what scarcity means? Scarcity doesn't mean that it's a rare earth or something like that. Scarcity
actually,
just
it's funny because that's actually exactly what it means.
scarcity actually
means it's scarce, rare. There's little of it.
Okay, scarcity in a theoretical way means already
the same. That's what it means. The same thing.
It's, the thing that you're describing is the extreme end of something that is on a spectrum, right? If you consider something scarcity as a spectrum, then the thing that you're describing is the far end of the spectrum, right? But
if you on the far end of the spectrum,
but if you consider scarcity as a binary, then we're talking about something that for example, digital files are not scarce.
Scarcity is a binary. Okay, go on.
Yes.
Go on, continue.
So there is things that if we use them, they don't get less. For example, intellectual property. That is not a scarce good.
Are you a natural law theorist or not?
No, I'm not.
Why are you using natural law theory to talk about this?
It's a very meaningful language to talk about these things. It makes completely sense. Like if you talk about scarcity in a adjective, like as an adjective, something is more scarce than something else, then it makes sense the way Sunday talks about it. But if you talk about conflicts over scarce goods, then we're talking about that's at least, maybe that's my confusion, but that's the way I talk about it.
I think I would advise us now, going forward, not to use proprietary terminology in reference to anarcho-capitalist legal theory, when none of us are anarcho-capitalists. By scarce, it seems you just mean physical.
Sure. How would you describe something that is that me and you can't both have at the same time? That me taking it from you would reduce you having it.
Word physical, like it occupies space.
I mean, a well is physical, right? We could technically use it without having infringing on each other's on each other's rights.
Yeah, we could possibly do that, but it is also possible
physical
that
is
I
not
say
not enough
myself.
Anyways, I don't think that's really important. I think.
Hold on,
Sunday you derailed
us.
Yeah.
Hold on, no, I'm not letting you run away with that.
It's not really important though. He got you there. Where are you going? Where are you taking us next?
Who, me or something?
Yeah. Oh, you said this wasn't important. You had something else you wanted to say.
Yeah, I want to. I think we all agreed that our current system with law enforcement. So we all agreed that there is conflict over scarce goods, or over physical goods. Okay, we all agreed there. And our current system is determining and telling us who owns what and who's the owner of what, and preventing any infringement of property rights. That's what our system does.
If I may, Thoughtbat, you're in England, right?
I'm in Wales, actually, but yeah.
Oh,
not say the same thing.
Jonah over here, and you're in Germany.
Yes.
You know what Wales is? Shut up. I'm in Canada. When you say our system, what are you talking about?
State.
But we're in different states.
Yes. But we all have the police, we all have courts, and these are all monopolies.
What do you mean they're all monopolies?
So there is no.
You just mentioned police and courts and the state. Like, what do you mean monopolies? You just bifurcated power between at least two institutions.
No, what I mean is there is no competing police force. There is no competing court systems. There is just one government.
But there are competing court systems. There's international law, there's state law, there's local courts versus federal courts. There's tons of competing authorities.
They're not competing. They're structured in hierarchies.
International law and state law isn't.
I don't know what obviously, like, then you're leaving the state, the definition of state, but like the moment you get into international territory, I don't think it's very different. I don't think it is really important, but in our state, in our geographies, in Canada and in Germany and in Wales, basically there is monopoly of violence of the state. The state has the say on
And you
who
think
owns
that's
what.
you think that's a condition, and you think it's a condition of property?
I'm asking Thoughtbat how he would make sure that someone's property is even respected.
Hang on, hold that thought.
Sure.
Thank you, Suresh.
Is it my-
A very scarce resource indeed. Sorry, as you were.
Is it my turn to talk?
Wait, Sunday, did you understand my question?
Say it again.
Oh dear.
Yeah, go ahead, Thoughtbat.
Yeah. So, before we move on, I'm still wanting to. Are we wrapping up this idea of like state of nature and biggest stick thing might makes right? Are we clear on what I mean when I say might makes right in the legal sense?
No, I don't think that you're right about that. But I just have to translate basically this whole might rate makes right point. I have to translate it to conflict over scarce goods, because somehow you're not able to grasp that concept of. I mean, I don't know. I'm not able to put my point across. That could also be the case, obviously. But basically, the might makes right point is the same point as conflict over scarce goods. That's the thing that the state is dealing with, and you are advocating for removing the state. And then I'm asking you, how is your system able to deal?
What about conflict over ego or honor or something?
We're talking about law specifically in conflict resolution. So I think.
Yeah, but he's talking about the basis of conflict. He's rooting it in scarcity. He's requiring a particular.
There can be other. There can be
talking about
dude. If I'm asking you about some specific problem that could arise in his system, that is the whole point, right? The whole point of our conversation is that I'm asking him how his system is working, right? And I'm pointing out one category of conflict that exists in our current society and that would also exist in his society, and I'm asking how he would solve it. And you asking for conflict of honor makes no sense because.
But if I may, but Thoughtbat, have you argued that property is a thing that exists under your system?
Yeah.
There you have. Okay. Well, continue, please.
Yeah. So under my system, there's something known as property. So I'm still not sure. So Kanak, I need you to clarify for me right here, right now. Do you understand what I mean when I say might makes right only in the legal sense and not in the ethical sense? Is that clear? Do you understand that coming from me? I don't care if you agree with it.
No, I don't understand. No, I don't understand it, because first of all, your ethics is egoism.
We're not talking about my ethics. No, we're not talking about my ethics.
But when you say in the ethical sense and not in the legal sense, I have no idea what you mean if we can't talk about your ethics.
Well, we're talking about how a legal system works, right? So you're asking me we're ultimately asking me how a polycentric legal model can work absent the state, right? That is a question about law. It's a question about political science. It's a question about sociology. It's not a question about
practical.
ethics.
It's also a practical question.
Yeah, that applies to all the three things I just said.
Yeah, and I am asking the practical question, and you keep making like, yeah, but not. How about the ethical way? And dude, how would you solve it in your system? It's a really simple question. Like, I'm asking the same question to Liquid Zulu, and he comes up with bounty hunters and I don't know, some other like competing justice systems and blah blah. And I disagree with that. I think it's bullshit. But at least he's answering the question, right? He's acknowledging that. Yes, obviously you have to make sure that people. You have to make sure that people.
He muddles ethics and law.
Bro, what?
Hang on.
He muddles ethics and law.
Sorry, say it one more time, Thoughtbat.
So you gotta answer from Liquid Zulu on your kind of question, which doesn't distinguish ethics and law, because Liquid Zulu himself muddles ethics and law. So if you're asking me a question, as someone who sees ethics and law as separate fields of study, and you're saying, "Oh, how does this work?" in your system, right? Are you asking me in the legal sense, or are you asking me in the ethical sense? Are you asking me what I think should happen?
Practically.
So the legal sense then.
Practically, what happens? What is the thing?
Okay, so
like,
what happens?
No,
Yes.
hang on. Sorry, correctically?
Okay.
I've never heard that word before. What does that mean?
practically, in practice.
Oh, practically. I'm sorry.
Practically.
Continue.
Yes.
In practice, right. So, I think at least the audience will be clear that I don't have ethics and law as the same thing, right? So anyways, the polycentric model goes like this. We have, rather than a monopolized state, so the monopoly and law determination across a given territory, you have multiple agencies, units, bodies, which are non-territorial, and they effectively agree internally and externally with other agencies, other federations, whatever, on the terms and conditions on which they solve conflicts. So the conflicts that Kanak was talking about. So say I steal Sunday's glasses. Sunday says, no, I want them back. Sunday might have his own agency that he goes to, and he says, right, Thoughtbat stole my glasses. Can you get after them, please? They contact my agency, say, right, here's the evidence. We've got evidence that Thoughtbat stole Sunday's glasses. And then we go to a
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yes, Sunday.
Okay. You say they're non-territorial.
Yes.
But they're separate.
But they're separate, yeah.
Okay. How are they separate?
So they're separate in the sense of my friendship group with you, me and Kanak are friends, right? You and Kanak might be friends. That's not a territorial relationship. It's not saying everyone on this piece of land here has this relationship with me. So it's more like same way like car insurance. Car insurance providers, they're not territorial.
Like clans?
Yeah, possibly like clans. The clan system, I think, was territorial, though. Like in terms of Scotland and Ireland, that system was territorial.
Well, because it becomes territorial, because you then have a whole bunch of people who are related to each other in a particular way, and they occupy a particular space. Otherwise, there's
so what we'll
see the organization.
We will go
so
there.
What you'll see is, hold on.
I promise.
Hold on. I was talking. So what you'll see is convergence or correlations with territories. So similarly to car insurance agencies, like they'll be more popular down here in London or less popular up in Liverpool, these kinds of things. So they'll correlate with territories, but they're not strictly saying, this is our turf, that is your turf. Like me sitting here in Wales, I can phone up this agency, I want to subscribe to you, or I can phone up that agency and I say, I want to subscribe to you. Without me having to move, I can just choose my legal provider.
Right, so all you'd have to do to game the system
Wait,
is just get a bunch
Sunday,
of buddies
don't do
to
my
go
job,
appeal
please.
to
I know
one
there's so
thing.
many flaws in what he's saying, but please don't do my job.
I'm asking for
so many
clarity.
questions.
There is no. Yeah, there is so many questions there. There is so many question marks, but
Yeah,
we
but
will
you couldn't
we will
move
get
off
there.
of you couldn't move off
We
of
will-
scarcity and the state
We
of
will
nature.
get
so
there.
it's-
No, we will get there, point by point.
No, I don't believe you. I don't think we will.
Okay, don't believe me, but it's your job to be a moderator,
Alright.
and you have to. Yeah. Okay. Don't.
No, it's not. I am doing this as an act of grace.
Pro bono. But
we're not paying Sunday at all.
Yeah.
Sunday's doing this out of the goodness of his heart. So
Okay.
Sunday's rules.
Okay, just
And that is a
now,
scarce resource.
Now I want to know something that I asked at the beginning. Why do you want these agencies? Why do you want them to even exist? Because you do see these property laws that come from these agencies. You do see them as something that is good, right? And you don't want just the stronger person to get the property. That's what you're trying to avoid, right?
Again, no, we can't avoid that.
Why?
We can't avoid.
Okay, but why then? Why do you even want these agencies to exist? What benefit do they serve?
So, the state has a problem known as the problem of rational ignorance. It is a public goods problem ultimately. So
over nothing existing. Nothing existing, because you're comparing it to the state, and I'm asking you why do these agencies exist and not nothing? Like, why are you not advocating for just abolishing the state, and why are you advocating for abolishing the state
go
and then
full
putting in
Heidegger
place
on
something
you.
else?
I will go full Heidegger on you ask if you say why nothing.
I
nothing?
don't know what that means.
Well, it means like you can't have nothing. But anyways,
Sure.
so why? So hang on a minute, Kanak. Earlier you phrased the situation saying, "But we've got the state. Why would you want these agencies?" Now you're saying, compare it to nothing. I'm not sure what you're asking on me.
No,
So the
I mean,
state.
my point is,
You are gonna let me answer. I'll answer it the way I see fit. I'll compare it to states. I'll compare it to lawlessness. How's that?
that's not good because that's not my question.
Oh, it's not good. Okay.
It's not my
What's your
question.
then?
My question is, what makes it better for the agency to exist? You say that the state has a problem. Okay, we abolish the state. So now you're left with nothing. And now you want to have agencies that exist to defend your property law. You want that. My assumption is you want that because you think that property laws existing is not just is good, and property laws existing is not just the stronger person hitting the weaker person over the head. That's the reason why you want these agencies, right? That's just my question, and you can say yes or no to that.
No, well, it's a false question. It's because when did I tell you that I want to abolish the state and then have nothing?
I'm saying that you don't want that. I'm saying that you want to abolish the state and then put in place agencies instead of the state. That's what you want.
Right.
And I'm asking you, why do you want these agencies? Because you don't want the state of nature, basically, where there is nothing. You don't want that.
We're done with that.
You
done
want
with states
the agencies.
We're done with states and
Sunday,
nature.
do you understand what I'm saying?
I do, and I've got a problem with it. May I?
Okay, sure. Yeah, sure. You can have a problem with that. But do you understand my question?
But if I may,
do you understand my question?
Well, that wasn't a question. That was a propositional statement.
No, the question is, why do you want that? And my assumption, and I shared my assumption. Does he agree with my assumption?
Yeah, but then you said what he wants, and he disputed that, and he insisted on what he wants.
Sure, I don't know what that means.
Statement.
Okay, go ahead. What's your objection?
He doesn't want there to be nothing there clearly, and then you put, well, he wants the state to be gone, so therefore he wants nothing clearly, right? Or he wants these things to be an ameliorative to the absence of the state.
But he doesn't want the absence of the state. He wants agencies. He wants agencies to replace the state.
Look. Hey. Do we agree that the state is equivalent to a monopoly of physical force existing?
Yes.
Monopoly of legitimate physical force. Okay.
Yes.
Then I ask you this: how on earth was their property before the state was a monopoly on physical force? Because it was for a couple thousand years, actually. There wasn't a monopoly on physical force in Athens, in the feudal system. Obviously, that's a relatively recent development. How did they defend their property at that time? How did they have property? How did they have things?
Are you asking me?
I am.
Yes. So if you're referring to a state where possession and ownership are the same thing, then obviously the stronger one just there is no property basically there. There is no ownership.
There is property clearly. Yeah, there is though clearly.
Are you talking about the state of nature right now?
No.
Okay, you're talking about what type of society are you talking?
There's no property in a state of nature, so it's a nonsense question when you're talking about the state of nature. If you're talking about historically, we only have even that definition. By the way,
you saying
even that definition of the state, where it's a monopoly of legitimate physical power within a given territory, even that sentence is caveated by saying nowadays this is what we talk about when we say the state, but it's not the state in perpetuity. No political scientist talks about it like that's always the state. That's not how it works.
But Sunday, in your
obviously not, because you have to assemble the monopoly on power at some point. And where does it get its territory from? Where do these institutions arise from? What generates the need for it? What generates the impetus? What generates the practice that makes that need something even cognizable? It's going to be a whole lot of societies that have managed to work with some degree of effectiveness for a very long time beforehand. But feudal societies, you'll have like previous like village stuff and whatnot. You'll have things that are defended and held up by just like organically emerging like clan structures and more artificial organizations that pull together and like push and pull against one another, and sometimes whole societies are eliminated and so on and so forth. But you fundamentally don't have a monopoly on legitimate physical violence for most of human history, and yet we've had buildings and property and industry and economy.
The thing that we're talking about is the word property, right? And if we want to talk about it in a general way without loading it with the ideology and the things that
you
we
can
think
have
about
property.
it,
You can have property. You can have property
wait,
without a state, but there's
wait.
different levels between state of nature and a state.
you just said that you can't have property without a state. That's what you said like 5 minutes ago, right?
No, you can't have property
No,
in a
he
state of
didn't.
nature. You can have property within a state. Without a state.
Yeah,
Easily.
that's why I heard.
Without
then
a
property,
state?
property,
Ah, okay.
property precedes the state.
Okay, so you're saying that there is
No. Think about this very quickly,
Yeah.
just logically.
Sure.
If the purpose of the state is to protect property, then by definition, property must be a thing people had in mind before the state was set up, right?
It depends
Otherwise, why
on
would
what
they
your
do it?
understanding of property is. For example, Liquid Zulu has a natural law understanding of property, and his understanding
He's
of
a bozo.
property. Yeah, but it's important because we are talking about different ideas of property theory. So the moment we talk about property, we can't just load it up.
But
We can't-
here's the difference, though.
We can't load up we can't
No, I
load up the
understand.
definition.
I get you. But I can solve your problem very, very quickly. What Liquid Zulu is talking about is nonsensical, and I'm talking about property.
But when
There.
your definition of property, you would not even be able to have a single conversation with Liquid Zulu. You would not be able even to discuss your differing points of view, because your definition already implies that there must be something enforcing the property, right?
No.
You saying that there is no law, there is no property in
The
nature,
property,
in
the
no,
property,
let me
the property,
finish.
the property.
Let me finish. Let me finish, bro.
Go on.
You saying that there is no property in
Call me bro one more time, and I'll keep going.
in the state of nature. You saying that makes no sense for someone like Liquid Zulu. So you basically can't talk with him about, with that definition of property, you're not able to
That
have
made no sense to me. Can you restate that, please?
You say that there is no property in the state of nature. To someone like Liquid Zulu, so that's already your definition. That's where you start, basically.
Okay, what's Liquid Zulu's
But
definition?
Liquid Zulu's definition of property is an objective one, where the property, who owns what, is something that is discovered and not determined. So in his
but hang on.
understanding, let me please finish.
His understanding.
His understanding. Please.
His understanding.
Please.
No, because you're wrong.
Please. But that's not all right. I need to finish this.
I don't need to.
No,
please.
but that's not okay. That's not okay. I need to finish this.
Okay, you got 5 seconds. Go.
His understanding of property clashes with your understanding of property, and that's the whole thing that we're discussing. So your definition already.
So here's the problem with Liquid Zulu's definition of property. Okay, Liquid Zulu's definition of property and state of nature presumes a state of nature that is an artificial society existence. So his state of nature isn't a state of nature.
I agree with that. I agree that his definition is.
So the reason why I can't talk to Liquid Zulu, to be clear, is because he's incoherent.
But we need to talk about a definition that is broad enough to encapsulate also his understanding. We can go off.
No, we don't. His
His
definition isn't property. I'm casting it out into the outer darkness.
Exactly,
count.
And then you can't even have a conversation with him. With someone.
No, that's up to him. I don't have to have a conversation.
No, you can't have a meaningful conversation.
My
with
understanding of property is in Grace in the Academy. His isn't.
Your understanding of the word property is already loaded with your understanding of what property should be, like what's a meaningful property of law. But it basically inhibits you from even having a conversation and to even convince him, for example, to put away his understanding of property.
That's like saying I can't have an argument about theology with someone if I can't include someone whose definition of God involves cheese. Like, obviously I can. I just ignore that one because he's a weirdo. Right?
I don't see the analogy. So you saying that there can't be property.
His definition of property has no properties in common with my definition of property. We're not talking about the same thing. But moreover, most people aren't talking about what Liquid Zulu is talking about when they're talking about property.
We know that you, me, Liquid Zulu, we all agree that something that is called property exists currently, right?
Not in a hard sense. I don't think property as such is a thing that has a metaphysical existence.
That's the problem. That's the problem. The source of what we would call property, the reason why we would call something like the book that is in your shelf, right? Me, you,
Which
and
one?
Liquid Zulu would all agree that this book is your property. We would all agree on that. Even though,
No, that's a possession. It's not property.
okay, I don't know what you're doing, man. Are you trying to derail this? Like, what the fuck are you doing, man?
I'm being
Come
an
on.
asshole. Keep
Yeah,
going.
like, come on, like, what the fuck? Okay, so we can all agree that this is your property, but somehow we have completely different understandings of what property means. And I'm saying that in order for us to have a fruitful conversation about our definitions of property, we have to remove the ideology from the definition of property.
Yeah, but the problem
why
is
we need
that
to have
the
the
problem
full
is that
sentences.
the notion of property by itself is already ideologically latent. If you're talking about that thing as a thing that exists, therefore we must actually encapsulate other people's definitions of property. Otherwise, we aren't doing a holistic scan of all the different approaches to this particular concept. You're treating it as if it is something that has some essential commonality between all of these, such
There
that
is.
some middle ground needs to be approached, but there isn't.
There is. It's basically legitimate possession. It is legitimate possession.
It's legitimate,
Sunday,
then
can I
you
ask
can't
you a
have property in a state of nature, because what legitimates it?
Exactly, like according to you, but according to Liquid Zulu, it is, since it is an objective law, it
No, watch
already
this.
exists. No,
Watch this. Okay, it's an hang on. No.
his justification
Breathe.
comes from
Hey,
logic and not
breathe.
from legitimacy.
Okay,
Yeah.
now I ask you this: who cares?
The debate cares about that. Like, to have a
The
fruitful...
debate care.
Yeah.
Is the debate with us right now?
Yes, it is with us. Yes.
Would the debate like to speak? No, I don't think the debate cares very much. She's been awfully silent so far.
Yes, but it cares very much. It cares very much, and this like it cares very much. It's really important to we can talk about, like, on two layers. It is possible for us to talk about property and for us to disagree about where the legitimacy of the possession comes from.
Right.
That's the thing that we're arguing about.
I want to see if this is clear. I want to see if this is clear. I've been out of the conversation as well. Sunday, does it make sense to you when I give my distinction between property in the ethical sense and property in the legal sense?
Yeah,
So, for example,
you're talking about some anointing of something as being an appropriate allocation and something that's the result of some kind of social enforcement.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Can
No,
you
imagine
repeat
if you
that?
just stated it that way.
Sunday,
Sorry,
can you repeat that? I didn't understand.
My way
that.
is much simpler.
No, Sunday, can you please
He's
restate
distinguishing. He's distinguishing between, for example, what Liquid Zulu would be talking about when he says that. Well, there is some kind of metaphysical follow through that makes it so that regardless of who takes this pointy stick, that stick is the stick of Ugluk over there. Okay, because Ugluk sharpened the stick. But there may be a social force that comes together and says, Ugluk, we're taking your stick and we're saying it's Gorp Corpse now. And it is Gorp Corpse because we have more sticks and we can hurt you if you disagree. Okay, so there you go.
But that's not the distinction between ethical and law. How is that the distinction? Which one is ethical? Which one is law?
The one that needs the sticks is law. The one that's coming down from the juju on the mountain, that's the ethical one.
But his ethics come from egoism.
Yeah, that's the juju on the mountain.
That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. His ethics are egoism.
That's what I was saying. It doesn't make any sense. I agree.
Thank you. It makes no sense. So that's why his whole distinction of ethical and blah blah is just blah blah. It's just
his distinction between social enforcement and blah blah, between ethical and
how is social enforcement automatically social enforcement to you is because you think the same thing as me. You think that law comes from social enforcement, right? That's what you think.
Well, what enforces what is a law?
No,
if
not
it's not
you thought that, Sunday. I mean,
what is a law if it's not enforced?
I agree.
Okay,
but he doesn't think that.
But he does. That's why he made the distinction between legal and ethical. That's the point.
His ethics are egoism. His ethics are egoism.
No, they're not.
They are.
Are your ethics egoism? Oh no! Hang on! Wait! Sorry, I got mixed up there for a second. It doesn't matter if his ethics are egoism. He doesn't need to ascribe to. He still distinguishes between the legal and the ethical. What does his ethics being egoistic have to do with that distinction?
I don't get the distinction that you're making. This blah 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 coming from the mountain. Like what is that?
One is the result of social practice that enforces a particular mode of behavior.
Couldn't that
The
also
other
be
one-
ethical?
Sure.
So why is it
But
set
what
in
would
stone?
what would make it also ethical? Right?
But there is no
Instead of the
distinction
ethical
then.
being redundant.
But there is no distinction then. If the social enforcement could be both ethical and legal, so where is the distinction?
Because it could also be otherwise. It could also be
don't-
otherwise. The point is that the ethicality doesn't come from legality, right? And vice versa.
I don't even know if he believes that.
That's only true. That's only true if might makes right in the ethical sense. If someone was to say to you, he who has the might has the ethical right. If I have the might to do X, I should do X, or it's morally permissible for me to do X. Only in that situation is there no distinction between what is socially enforced and what ought to be enforced. But I don't hold that. I don't hold that axiom in ethics at all. My ethical system is a error-theoretic fictionalist model based on my self-interest.
I have no idea what that means. What these terms mean.
I'm gonna be honest. I'm with Ugluck on this one. I don't know what you just said.
It's just blah blah. I don't know.
It's not just blah blah. It's meta-ethics, right? So meta-ethics is Sunday. You're an anti-realist, right?
More of an
You're an
but yeah.
You're a moral anti-realist.
Sure.
Yeah. So in anti-realism, you got two theories. You got non-cognitivism, which is you got three actually. You got non-cognitivism.
You know what? I changed my mind. I'm not a moral anti-realist anymore.
You got moral non-cognitivism, where your moral statements are not truth apt. So it's not like a true or false thing. You're just communicating feelings and attitudes. You got error theory, which is where I'm at. All moral statements are false. And then you've got a constructivist thing where normative statements are true or not, dependent on whatever axioms that person feels like they're holding to. But anyways, so we've got non-cognitivism. Moral statements are not truth apt. Error theory. Moral statements are truth apt, but they are all objectively false. On top of error theory, we have fictionalism. Fictionalism is where we make up a theory. We act as though morals are true because it's pragmatic to do so.
Dude, we are trying to solve a practical issue, a game theoretical practical issue, which is what would
game theory? How? What's the game?
Now we're doing game theory.
Explain the game theory.
I'm calling it game theory because we are looking at a practical example where we're trying to find out what would happen. What would happen? Dude, your ethics are egoism. You think that ethics don't exist. You think that actually ethics don't exist.
Yeah, I'm an anti-realist. So let's leave ethics.
What are you talking about? Why are you talking about ethics? Like, why would you even make that distinction if you don't believe that they exist? But you don't believe that ethics exist.
I'll say it again. I'm trying, Kanak.
Because may I?
Because what?
Hang on. I'm gonna translate this for you. Okay, thought Pat. You can thank me later. What he means is that the ethical category, which he's still able to entertain and abstract, is superfluous. You don't need to talk about it.
But he still keeps bringing it up. I'm not bringing it up.
That's because the people he's arguing with bring it up.
No, I'm asking a practical question. I'm asking what would happen and what would he do? And then he's saying, yeah, but legally it's that and ethically it's that, but he doesn't believe in ethics.
So let's track the conversation. So Sunday, the reason why I'm stressing on this is because Lord Kanak is asking me, how do we come away from this? How in law, in legal theory, does anarchism come away from this idea that might makes right? In the legal sense. In the legal sense, that's unavoidable. You have to have physical power to impose rights no matter what. If you want to defend yourself against other people, anyone who's attacking you, you need to have some kind of force to defend yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to be defended. Right?
That is a sufficient. That is not a sufficient condition.
Hold on. And then Kanak says that's not sufficient because then we have something called consensus. Now, consensus there is a little slippery thing, which is where we're now diving into ethics. He's saying what legitimizes, in a moral sense, the law is consensus. So because we have consensus, Kanak says, therefore we have the law. Then I put it to Kanak, this is not the case, because we have things like, I don't know, dictatorships, feudal societies, which enforce laws, what we would call laws, without consensus. So it's still the case in any given society, communist, anarchist, feudalist, liberal, whatever, to have property law, you need to have might. Consensus
It is
isn't,
necessary. It is not sufficient.
it's not relevant. It's not
It's
necessary. Because they, right, okay, right. So answer me this: did King George have consensus across England?
it's a
George
monarchy, I guess, right?
Yeah, King George III. Did he have consensus support in England?
I don't know.
The answer's no. Right. So no, he didn't. Did he
I don't know what
enforce
you're getting
laws
at, man.
across? Because I'm asking
Do you
you.
wanna have your
Okay.
Do you wanna have your system tested?
No. I want to make sure that
Fight,
you don't start being.
You don't want your
fight,
system
sir.
tested, I guess.
I want to make sure that you don't start slipping ethics into it when I'm explaining legal theory. Okay? I'm trying to compartmentalize the conversation so that you don't start changing the subject. This is why I'm strict. I said to you in the private chat, I am going to strictly keep to one topic or the other.
Sunday, do you know what he means when he says that I'm slipping in ethics?
No, not a clue.
Thank you.
You're going to have to explain that
neither.
20 more times, Thoughtbat.
I have no idea what you mean.
So, okay, let's go through this again.
No, man. Like how many times are we going to do this? This is ridiculous, man. This is ridiculous. It's just a practical. It's a fucking practical. It's a practical question. It's a practical question.
Ugluk, Thoughtbat's going to talk for 3 minutes. Okay, I'm going to count.
No way, 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Yes, 3 minutes.
and then I'm going to give you 2 minutes because I've got the stick.
Yeah, he's got the stick. Right. So I was asked why anarchism, or how anarchism prevents it from being the case that he who has the most might doesn't win out in any given disputes over property. Right? I say that is always going to be the case. You always need to have might in order to enforce your right in the legal sense. Then you say, no, it's not sufficient. We need consensus. Okay, that's not the case in any given society. It's not the case that you need consensus to enforce rules. All you need is might. Consensus doesn't matter. But for you, consensus is a legitimizing thing. It's a moral component. You're slipping in normativity when we're having a conversation about how law works, right? So I don't care if you think consensus makes a legal system legitimate or moral. We're not talking about that. So keep ethics out of the conversation. And when we can begin to talk about how an anarchist legal system or anarchist system of conflict resolution can possibly work without your ethical bullshit. I'm done. I see my time.
Yeah, you have to wait until his time's up. Unfortunately, it's the rule.
What is the? That's the whole reason why I keep asking you. What is the reason why you're putting in an agency or any sort of institution or thing that would move us away from the natural state? That's the reason why I'm asking you that. And the reason, I suspect, the reason is that you think that the person hitting the weaker person over the head with the stick and taking their property is not the legitimate owner. That's my assumption. But if you have a different reason why you don't want that nature state, which you obviously don't want.
You keep saying he's moving away from the nature state, but he's not moving away from a nature state.
Actually, he's not. Exactly. Actually, he's not. Exactly, Sunday.
Right.
Actually, he's not. His agencies are just elevating the nature state to a different level, but actually, he's not doing anything. But
wait, slow down. So, what do you mean by that? Elevating the nature state to a different level. What do you mean?
So the inability to solve the conflict outside of violence persists also with his agencies. So therefore, he's not moving away from the nature state at all. But I'm asking him.
We're not in a nature state though. We are in a state of society, and yet we have conflicts over scarcity. So I fail to see the distinction here between a state of nature and a state of society on your view. They seem to be very similar.
Sorry, what? You don't see the difference between state of nature and our current society, for example?
No, it seems like when you say a state of nature, you take that to be identical with the absence of a modern state form.
Yes.
But that's not identifiable with the state of nature on ThoughtPad's view, because there are other forms that precede the modern state form. Right?
He wants the modern state form gone. Correct?
Yeah.
And
sure.
he doesn't, and that's not where things end.
But why would that entail a return to a state of nature?
You are saying that there's intermediary.
Like the modern state form took thousands of years to get here. Why would removing the modern state form entail a return to before society?
Can you give an example of what you mean? Like, what would be
every social entity that has existed,
for example,
to the beginning of written history?
For example,
I just gave you all the.
I just wanted an example, a concrete example. I don't know what you mean.
Tenochtitlan in Mexico.
I have no idea what it is. You just made it up. Can you give like a real example? Dude, I feel like I'm fighting against two people derailing the conversation.
Athens. Athens. There you go. Athens.
Athens. What is Athens?
No.
Athens is you talking about democratic, like Athens where they have a parliament, and like, is that the Athens you're talking about?
Talk about derailing conversation.
They had a parliament in Athens.
I don't know what they had. They had like a something type of government.
It was a federation of autonomous.
I agree.
Households.
They had something kind of government. Yeah.
It was a federation. It was a federation of autonomous households that voted as a collective to do things and to elect people to governing positions.
And that's not government?
Temporarily over. No, it's not.
That's not government.
No, it's not, because there was a permanent institution of government. That's
okay. My understanding of government includes that as well. It means that you have a monopoly of violence. That's what I mean.
But they didn't have a monopoly of violence.
That? Okay,
no,
but
there were multiple entities in society that could exert force. There were private guards, there were slaves, there were soldiers in times of war, there were like whatever, hoplites or whatever.
Wait, but who was basically governing these federal districts?
The people governed these districts. So
it
how
was
worked was.
But it was direct democracy or representative democracy, or what was it?
It was direct democracy, because the representative democracy would require a government institution, because they have a permanent thing that exists to represent the will of some jurisdiction. But that wasn't the case here. You had people actually coming to represent themselves as decision makers. Yes.
But
that's why they jealously guarded like who could be considered a citizen, because it actually like radically affected voting outcomes.
The enforcement.
Yeah.
There was one law under which, in each federal state, there was one law which applied, right?
What are you talking about? Under each federal state, there's one federal state. That was Athens.
Okay. No, right. Sorry. I mean in each... I know what you mean. So the law is the same in all of Athens? Or is it different in each state?
It's different depending on where you are. So, for example, they had this is actually a critical part of the whole system, was called autonomy. The idea is that within someone's household, the citizen, the man, was the law.
You're saying that's not a
life and death
state
within his own house.
You are saying that what you're describing there was no state in what you're describing there.
I mean, it's a polis, to be more particular. It's not a modern state. No, there's no monopoly.
I didn't say modern state. I stated no state. So no one to enforce the law.
It wasn't a state. No. Speaking loosely, it was part of like the general genealogy of political institutions, but it was not a state. No.
So geographically, there was competition in terms of violence. There was not a monopoly on violence geographically.
What do you mean by that? Geographically, was a monopoly on violence.
What are you talking about? Geographically, what's there not to understand about that? Geographically, there is a monopoly of violence in Germany. The German state has the monopoly on violence in the territory of Germany.
Yes, because you have a governmental institution that sits apart from society. That's not the case.
That's what I think when I say state. State is a geographical
Yeah, that's
monopoly
the
on
problem.
violence.
That's why I'm saying like your position is ideologically laden. You're
Sure.
presuming a modern.
What is
You're
what?
presuming modern governmentality in your notion of the political end and statehood.
So your understanding of state is different than geographic monopoly of violence?
Yes, because the notion of geographic monopoly of violence being the definition of a state only was invented in the last couple hundred years.
Okay, and what was the definition? Wait, but now it is.
Do you know where it's from?
Wait,
do you know who said that?
No, I'm very uneducated, so I have no idea.
But then why would you assume that it is so?
I'm asking you.
If you don't know the history of the terms you're using,
I have no idea about
this history. With such confidence that this is what
I'm
like
asking
the basis of law and society is.
About right now, currently, when I say state, when you say state, do you understand this to mean geographically bound monopoly of violence?
No.
Okay, what is your definition of state?
There's several different definitions of state. Generally, it's used as a shorthand for any type of political institution taken as a whole. Sometimes people use the word polity or whatnot when they're trying to avoid being presentist and saying state in like contexts where that implies things that aren't true. So sometimes people refer to ancient Greek polises as city-states. There are reasons to not like that term. So some people say polities or whatever. I like to be more specific and say polises, but I'm weird. And all of these different organizations have different rule structures, not governing structures, rule structures. They have different mechanisms and relationships between the people in them.
I don't
to produce decisions, right?
Sure. I don't think it's even important for a conversation. I can just replace all of my questions and all of my criticisms. I can just replace it by he doesn't want a geographical monopoly of violence. Correct, Thoughtbat? Is that correct?
I don't want a state which is defined as a monopoly on law determination.
We seem to not be we seem to not be able to agree on the definition.
Let's keep it simple. Thoughtbat. You do not want there to be a monopoly of physical violence within a territory in your system.
Thank you.
That's correct.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay. That is correct.
Great.
All right. Now, why does he need one?
Exactly. And now I'm asking.
No. I'm asking a question. Why does he need one? Now I'm asking you.
Because otherwise he's not solving the actual issue that we don't want, which is the solving of conflict. So if
solving a conflict, okay, what's the basis of conflict?
The basis of conflict for example, one basis of conflict can be a disagreement on scarce goods. Scarce in the sense
scarce
of
goods. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. What scarce goods?
Whatever scarce goods. Doesn't matter.
Which is scarce goods generally? Like water?
We've already talked about this. We already know that these types of conflicts exist. We already know that
but the kind does matter. So for example, there are types of scarcity that are directly dependent upon a certain system of government or state ideology or capitalist acquisition in order to become a matter of scarcity in the first place. Right?
The one
like if you have expanding states that want to gobble up real estate, like what's happening in Palestine at the moment, then that need for real estate, that scarcity, is directly generated by the capitalist system itself, by the state system.
Sure.
If you don't have that, you don't have that scarcity.
Sure. So there is goods. There's scarcity, and there's goods that are being produced by the state itself. Is that what you're saying, right?
Well, I'm asking for what particular kinds of scarcity would be present under the conditions of Thoughtbat society.
Do you think there's types of scarcities that always exist?
Not necessarily, no.
Do you think that in the nature state, if you remove the state, if you remove the monopoly?
Well, in a state of nature, there isn't a distribution problem, right? In a state of nature, you don't have.
Do you think two people can start fighting over objects and be in disagreement about who owns that and who they both want it?
Yes, but in a state of nature, they wouldn't stay to fight for very long. It also wouldn't be anybody else's problem, right?
What? It
wouldn't be anybody else's problem in a state of nature. A state of nature is a state without society, right? It's a pre-societal situation. Okay, so in a pre-societal situation, you are not part of a society to be concerned about the little squabbles that you get into. And so if you decide to risk your life or your safety holding on to a stick that some stronger person is trying to take from you, that's kind of your problem. That's a state of nature.
ThoughtBat wants to remove the current monopoly on violence, the territorial monopoly of violence. That's what ThoughtBat wants to remove. And when he removes that, my assumption is that the moment he removes that, people are going to start taking each other's shit because there is no more enforcement of what used to be property.
Yeah, but
right?
But
so people are going to start breaking in.
Here's the thing, though.
People are going to start breaking into your house.
I'm going to catch you up. I'm going to catch you up about 2,000 years of political philosophy. Okay. So here's the catch, though. The reason why they would start taking each other's property is because they are not creatures of the state of nature. They are modern subjects. They are modern subjects that value X, Y, and Z objects as property that they will then try to obtain without some kind of overtop enforcement, right?
That doesn't matter. ThoughtBat,
but it does matter. It means you're not in a state of. It means you're not in a state of nature.
Sure.
Because people are conditioned to act as if you're not in a state of nature.
Sure. Yes. ThoughtBat wants to abolish the monopoly on violence, territorial monopoly on violence. The moment he does that, people are going to start breaking into your house and are going to steal your shit. Okay?
Why? No, they won't.
That's my assumption. That's what I think.
I don't have.
That's what I think. Do you disagree?
Hey, I do actually. So watch this. There was a break-in on my street a little while ago. And you know what the police do when there's a break-in? If you don't have a camera that catches the face of the person who did it, they show up, they write it down, and they go back to the station, and you never hear about it again.
Okay.
And yet, all the houses have not been broken into, despite the fact that there is de facto no police reaction to deter them from doing so. It's almost as if people are actually motivated to do things that make their lives better and make them safer and that they get enjoyment from, and that breaking into people's houses is dangerous, risky, and strenuous and makes you undesirable to the people around you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you don't benefit from that, right?
Forget about let's forget about that, for example. I think
but why? That's kind of critical, bullshit. Right? Because the point is that your monopoly on physical violence doesn't actually deter. No, but it doesn't actually deter criminals from stealing.
Sure, but without the law basically being there, which you agreed there, without like the moment we abolish that monopoly of violence, the moment we abolish that, a person cracking your door open and taking your book wouldn't even be stealing.
But they would be stealing, though.
Oh, how would they be stealing? You said that enforcement is necessary for it to be illegal.
No, enforcement is necessary for it. Well, no,
if there is no
law,
law,
about what's written on the books versus what is quote unquote law in the capital L sense.
If there is no law, then he hasn't stolen anything. And what I'm asking,
no property. If there's no property, he hasn't stolen anything.
That's the same thing.
No, because there's a social consensus that things that you possess and you use are yours in a particular sense. Things that are within like a certain like whatever, which is
I agree with
by
that.
law. Yeah.
But ThoughtBat doesn't.
What do you mean ThoughtBat doesn't?
ThoughtBat doesn't think that it's the consensus that makes the legality. That is also a necessary condition.
No. Well, that consensus doesn't make legality, just to be clear. But moreover, ThoughtBat's position, which I agree with, is that consensus doesn't mean that there is some magical register in the clouds somewhere that says it is wrong, quote unquote, for someone to do that. It is negative in the sense that it makes me really not like the person. It makes everybody really not like the person, to the point where that becomes a disadvantageous thing to do, certainly if you get caught, for that person.
Wait, according to you,
introduces like risk.
According to you.
What do you mean according to me?
I'm going to ask. According to you, is what makes someone stealing your book? What makes that stealing? What makes that illegal? What makes someone cracking up your door and taking this book? What makes that stealing? What makes that illegal?
It's the act of acquiring something without the legitimizing.
Where is that legitimizing?
That typically goes through. It's taking without exchange.
That's exactly the point that I'm asking. What's legitimizing you owning that thing? you possessing that thing? What's the legitimacy? Where does that come from?
Metaphysically, nothing. It is entirely socially constructed.
Okay, but socially constructed means consensus. That's
No, it
exactly
doesn't.
what. So yes, it does.
No, it
Socially
doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
constructed. Socially
No, it doesn't.
constructed.
No,
No, it
How would
doesn't.
you have a social construct without having consensus on that social construct? If you just one person believes in a social construct, it's not a valid social contract. It doesn't apply.
hold on. Consensus isn't just more than one person.
I didn't say that. It's the majority. There needs to be
Why
some.
did you talk about one person then?
Yeah, I said that as a counterexample. That one person is not enough to make something.
No one here is saying it's one person.
I'm saying that it doesn't make
When you
something.
say, hang on. When you say consensus, what do you mean?
Consensus
Do
means
you
a
mean
majority.
positive? Do you mean positive, verbally given, intellectualized consensus? What do you mean?
It doesn't matter. It can be both. Consensus just in general.
Well, but hang on, not both. That was
This
one.
is the slippery
No,
tactic he does.
consensus just in
That was
general.
one.
Consensus
This is
in
what he does.
general. Whatever you want to talk about.
Because the consensus around
Do you want me
like
to
personal
answer?
belongings is behavioral. It's not something that people assent to positively.
Do you know that consensus is a general concept? You can apply it in informatics. You can apply it to behavior. You can apply it to a bunch of things. Correct? Consensus is
I didn't say consensus wasn't a concept. What are you talking about?
a consensus is not bound to me saying something.
I was asking what you specifically mean by consensus.
Consensus
Because
is a majority.
I was taking you to mean like when you say majority, that's strange. Because it doesn't need to be. It just needs to be enough to be effective, right? It just needs to be enough to produce a result.
Sure.
Then
sure.
it becomes a social like this.
There needs to be more.
Even your notion.
There needs to be agreement.
Even your notion. Hang on. Even your notion of a monopoly of physical force being the mechanism by which theft is deterred presumes something that is not very obvious. Because I just gave the example of like police, for example, not being omnipresent, not even being competent in order to actually deter people in practice. All that needs to happen is for it to be treated as such enough that the system holds, and boom.
Wait, what was your last point?
That acts as...
I didn't get your last point. Can you repeat your last point?
The notion of a monopoly on physical violence deterring people from doing stuff,
yeah,
presumes that people treat it as if it is so, even when it clearly isn't, frequently, right?
I'm saying that is what makes something illegal. It's not. It's also deterring.
No, because things can be made illegal by fiat.
Also
by fiat.
deterring.
No, because that's not true. This is what actually happens. Things are made illegal by fiat. A bunch of people disagree with the fiat, and so a clever guy called Thomas Hobbes comes along with an argument and says, well, actually, you've all consented to the rule of this thing, therefore what they do is consented to by you. People act as if that is so because that person who did it by fiat has command of a whole bunch of people with guns, and if you disagree very loudly, he can make it inconvenient for you. And then adjacent to all of this, people also generally do not steal from each other, and so you have this wonderful situation of, look, I've got a rock. It keeps tigers away. Really? How do you prove this? I can't. But I don't see any tigers around. Do you? Boom. That's the logic you're deploying right now.
No. My understanding of law is ability to enforce plus consensus. But that doesn't matter. That is not important. The thing that I'm saying is that if he removes... Sorry?
You've contradicted yourself on that multiple times. They've given you situations.
Oh my god.
Like a feudal society. No, don't oh my god me. I've given you multiple situations, like a feudal society, like a dictatorship, where there is no consensus behind the legal system in place, and you say, yes, that is law, but it does not matter. It's like, what?
And that is not, to me, that is not, so either there is, you could look at it from two perspectives. A monarchy, either you can look at it as illegitimate because you say that there is not enough consensus. That would be one way of looking at it. The other way you can look at it is that you say that there is enough consensus to not overthrow the government.
You're misunderstanding. Here's the problem. You don't understand the theory you're using, okay? The theory you're using that talks about the state as being monopoly on physical violence, that is by the exact same person that says that monopoly on physical violence is actually dependent upon how it is treated in practice. And here's the problem. How it is treated in practice does not actually track onto there being an actual consensus that gives rise to the thing that a consensus is being applied to. So, for example, you talk about a monarch might not have enough consensus, but the monarch does have enough consensus because he's a monarch. Why is he a monarch? Because people treat him as if his power is such that he will do the thing X, Y, and Z.
And that was the second perspective that I gave. I said that's one perspective that you can look at it. That you say
that's not because because it's not a matter of there being enough consensus. Consensus isn't either or in this case.
I am saying to me, my understanding. You keep conflating two things. I'm not saying that there is no illegitimate governments in the world. According to me, my understanding is that if a monarchy can be illegitimate, it can also be legitimate.
No, I'm saying you don't understand legitimacy. Like that's not what legitimacy means.
That's the whole thing that we are talking about. Like you saying that I don't understand it. I have
the reason the nature of the state being monopoly of physical force, right? Being legitimate by dint of having a monopoly on legitimate physical violence.
That's a stretch. That's not what that's
that which has the monopoly on legitimate physical violence is the state. That's what that means. Legitimacy.
Can we establish what legitimate even means here?
That's the whole point of contention.
On this state, that's
the thing that we already know.
That's not a point of but that's not a point of contention because you're relying entirely on Weberian state theory. You just don't know anything about it.
Bro,
the entire point of this line of argumentation actually is that legitimacy literally is that which is treated more often than not as so. That's legitimacy.
Isn't that? But you just state the point of contention of the whole debate.
No, I didn't.
You did. You just said that that's what legitimizes the law, right? That's what you just said.
No, I said that's what legitimizes everything on the state theory
including the law. So you're making basically a point about the thing that we're discussing, and I disagree with that. And you're just acting as if that's the obvious thing that's the way it is.
Well, hang on. But if you disagree with that, that's a problem because that's the basis of saying that the modern state with the monopoly on legitimate physical violence is the source of laws being obeyed.
That's the whole thing that we're discussing. And by the way, ThoughtBat also disagrees with that.
I disagree with that.
Sure, you can disagree with that.
What am I disagreeing with?
You also
I actually don't know.
Bro, you guys have derailed this conversation so perfectly.
No, you're derailing the conversation.
Sunday, I congratulate you. You perfectly trolled us all. Okay, listen. Okay. I want to have a simple, like, it's a very, very simple conversation. We take away the monopoly of violence. You replace it with an agency which is not bound territorially. How do two agencies that disagree about who owns something, how do they solve their dispute, first of all? And secondly, what's the relationship between me and that agency? Do I pay them? I can't pay them because we don't even know what property is at this point.
I can explain this.
No,
I can explain
Sunday,
this.
you have derailed this conversation like
but
for
I can
1.5 hours. No, really, I regret so much that we put you in charge of
Who cares? It was boring me. I had to make it better.
Yeah, so you just trolled us. You just fucking trolled us.
Exactly.
No, wait. I want him to answer that. He needs to answer that. He needs to answer that.
He needs to answer that. You don't. Don't answer anything. Keep your mouth shut, okay? Don't say anything until you talk to your lawyer. It's really easy. Look,
have a turn after you.
Yes, go ahead, Sunday.
I will consider it. It's really easy. There's more people, as there are in my neighborhood, despite that one break-in, than there are of the one person who will go crazy and try to steal the property by force. That's it. So you get a posse together, based on consensus, and you beat up the guy who stole the property, and they don't do it anymore. There you go. And then you all disband afterwards. It's great.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Simple. Easy.
Cool. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. Can I now answer? That's, to me, that is not different in principle than having a democracy and having a state, because basically
it is different from both.
Can you let me
ways.
fucking finish, man? Can we have a moderate ThoughtBat? Can you please moderate President Sunday?
No, you guys abnegated the right to a moderator when you decided that this was a conversation instead of a debate.
I need you to let me finish this. So this is not
But I don't
different.
I don't need me to let you finish this.
You don't want to have this conversation?
No, I'm bored as
Then let's
fuck right
end
now.
it. What can I say? Like, then let's end it.
Very well, gentlemen.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure.
Sure.
Final statements, anyone?
Right,
if I can
so
finish,
final-
then I would do a final statement, but only if I'm
Okay,
allowed to finish.
board Kanak, you get 3 minutes. Go, and then Thought Bat.
Okay. So the problem is that your version, where basically a gang would come together and fix the conflict for us, because there is more people that are non-violent than people that are violent, and the problem is that would be a monopoly, a territorial monopoly, and that's the exact thing that ThoughtPad is trying to evade. And he wants to have, the thing that he wants is basically that there is competition between the agencies. So there must be more than one gang. There can't be just one gang. So, and then since also he claims that the ideas of what the law is subjective, there is also potential for disagreement. So these two different agencies will have some disagreement at some point, and then we have no way of solving the disagreement between the two agencies. Secondly, you also have the problem that these people are basically putting their lives on the line for you, and they must do so either from a philanthropic standpoint or they must do so from a monetary standpoint. Hoops, monetary, we can't do it because we don't know what property is. So how would we have a monetary relationship there? We wouldn't have one. So it can only be philanthropic, the way Sunday described it. But it can't be a monopoly, so there must be more than one. So there is no way of fixing both of these issues. And therefore, I think the thing just falls in the water.
And that's why no states exist and all of them are at constant war with each other. Go on, Thought Bat, your reply, 3 minutes.
I'm not going to respond to the monetary stuff because that wasn't talked about in the debate. That's introducing new concepts in your closing statement. That's naughty. But anyway, so I was asked the question: how would two agencies agree on a given dispute? Well, we have something called the principle of constant dealings in economics. So when agencies know that they're going to be dealing with other agencies in the future, they preemptively agree paths of conflict resolution prior to any dispute between members occurring. Second, we have this thing called convergence, because if you have all these different legal agencies enforcing all these kinds of wacky arbitrary laws, and there's no kind of, it becomes incredibly difficult for these legal systems to function. So there's a tendency towards conversions on the sorts of policies and legal frameworks that the providers are offering. Because this is either monetary or is philanthropic, getting legal stuff done requires some kind of profit. It requires some kind of resources. There's a tendency towards defensive laws, because if my agency says, right, I'm going to defend you every single time you steal from someone, it's like, well, if you're saying, oh, you can go ahead and get me involved in all these different conflicts, well, why would you want to do that? So you want to have, in this kind of polycentric system, there is a tendency towards defensive laws. We're saying we don't want you to initiate conflicts with other people because we don't want to have to deal with that. We want to minimize the shit we have to deal with by saying we're only protecting you against people affecting you. Conflict escalation is not a desirable means of conflict resolution, and authoritarian laws are only imposed within groups. They can't be imposed across different legal agencies.
Okay. I think we can all agree that ThoughtBat lost because he didn't know what a proper noun was. Thank you, gentlemen.
I don't know if I want to thank you.
I forgot why I don't do these anymore.
Man, this was horrible.
It was horrible.
Yeah.
Good God. Okay,
here's
the rule. When you guys do debates, when you want debates with moderation, okay, you need three things. You need a format. You need opening statements, arguments, closing statements. That has to be the thing. It can't just be one person being interviewed about their position and one person doesn't know anything about.
And the moderator can't derail more than the person that doesn't want to have the conversation.
Well, that's my point. It's not a debate then. Like it's you weren't having a debate. Like you fundamentally were not having a debate.
Bro, I wish.
Yeah. On trial is a format of debate, isn't it? Like this is like an anarchism on trial thing.
That sucks.
Yeah, that's fun. I love doing that.
Yeah, but you're weird.
Sunday. The amount of books behind you don't get to call me weird, bro.
Yes, I do.
Even though I have probably more.
Connoisseur.
Let's see. What's the most recent book you read, mate?
The Little Engine That Could.
A little engine that could.
Could.
Is that a kid's book or is that a
It's a classic.
classic? I've been reading the Catechism of
Anarchist
the
classic.
Catholic Church. That's really fun.
Thoughtbet,
Anyways,
do you want to stay in the call and continue
You're
on
welcome.
this?
You
on
guys
this
are
line?
welcome. You guys are welcome. You guys are welcome to chill in my Discord. And
Thanks.
continue the conversation.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so
Right,
would you like to
see you later.
address? Would you like to address the criticism that I have in regards to
Oh, no, hang on.
it not being possible?
Elsewhere. Other channel, please. Get out of this one.
Okay,
Thanks for having us Sunday. Bye bye.
You're welcome. Bye.
have a good one. Let me just.
Hello.
Yo. Okay. Man, this was a real shit show. It was worse than our first conversation.
To be honest with
We
you,
just-
I didn't expect Sunday to be like that. I wasn't expecting that. Have you seen epic rap battles where Austin Powers is like, it's a James Bond thing, and then suddenly Austin Powers in his rap, he's pushed out, but he's like, "Can I get into my rap, please?" And you can't.
No, I don't.
Anyway.
I don't know. I know epic rap battles, but I haven't watched that one. Yeah, but so I
Austin
don't know.
Powers with James Bond.
We man, like, let's. I don't know. Maybe we can have a better conversation like that, because I feel like many of the paths we took in our first conversation, we were not even able to take, because Sunday basically has a preconceived notion of property theory and property that is so far away, that is already loaded with so much. So it would not even make sense for him to have a conversation. Do you got what I said when I said that, right? That it would not even make sense to have a conversation with Liquid Zulu, for example. So even though me, you, Liquid Zulu, we could all say that this glass is my property, we would all be able to basically say that, right? And we would be in accordance about that. We would have no way of talking about what the legitimacy is if we apply the property definition of Sunday.
Yeah, it's why we need to get the meta language out of the way. We need to debate meta language, right?
We need to debate the thing that at the end where he said, like, yeah, but you're just wrong about what legitimizes something. That's the thing we're talking about. We're basically talking about, is that legitimately in my possession, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. At least we're in agreement on that. Maybe we needed a derailing moderator to bring the two of us together. So yeah, maybe
it is
we can,
pretty late.
Yeah, sure.
It is. We have been here for 2 hours. I know you've still got a lot of points.
Yeah.
I feel like you're not satisfied just yet, and I can understand why. To be fair with you.
Yeah.
I reckon. It's up to you. Do you want to do this again, like a third one, or do you think your audience might be a bit bored of me?
I think not from you directly, but just from the topic, my audience is 100% bored. They're already bored from me doing anything outside of, like, anything that goes into economics. They're pretty bored.
Oh, I see. So you're done with that.
But I would love to just hear, like, if you have, like, maybe another half an hour to 40 minutes max. If you have, like, to just hear your answers.
I should be in bed. Let's do another. I'll cut you halfway. We'll do another 20 minutes. How's that?
Sure. So first contention is, since we have multiple. So first contention is, what's the relationship between me and the agency? Why would they do that? Either from philanthropic reasons or for monetary reasons.
So, from my position, I'm not advocating this or that. I think it's possible in my system for either way to work. Most likely, most agencies would be monetary, but you could have some agencies which are more maybe community oriented or they're religious based that would provide free services. But most of it would be monetary. I predict.
But the problem is, monetary can only exist if there is already property, and if the agency decides what is property, that doesn't work, right?
Yeah, but that's not. I'm not saying the property rights coming from the payments, so to speak. I'm saying that the agencies are already pre-existing, right? So this calls into praxis. So how an anarchist society is going to come about. We already have a market system. We already have money. We already have this and that. And the strategy is for anarchist federations, which do exist today, by the way, is for them to grow in their influence in society. So they would already be operating under the law of money, the law of property, and things like that. And they just say, we are going to enforce your personal property rights, your monetary rights, and things like that.
I don't get
They're
that, to be
carrying
honest.
on from this system.
Like, we are on an island, and I have to now, like, now that I have my, like, I'm on the island, we're stranded, and basically now I have to find myself an agency, right? So how do I get an agency, and what is the relationship between me and that agency?
Well, on a desert island, I'll be honest with you, I have no idea. But I'm talking about anarchism as applied to Britain or Germany or Europe.
Okay, how would be the
It's a
transition,
problem.
maybe? Sure. Let's maybe transition from now, like now, like how would, basically, maybe that's possible. Maybe I'm wrong about
Yeah.
that. Maybe that's possible. So we now have money, right?
Mhm.
So how would we
We have
transition to an agency system from a government system to an agency system?
yes, yeah. So what I do is I say what I do. What I advocate as a strategy is called gradualism, and gradualism is when you build the new society in the shell of the old. And what that means is we have the state, we have capitalism, we have all this, but we have institutions, organizations which operate in a way that's compatible with anarchism. These are cooperatives, workers' cooperatives. These are housing cooperatives, mutual banks, anarchist federations do exist, trade unions. Those organizations exist today. And so the anarchist proposal is to have them grow, have them become more influential, and have them be what people go to as opposed to the state or capitalist institutions to get through legal disputes, to do business, things like that. So the idea is we have these mutual institutions become more influential in our lives and like a gradual process. It's called eclipsing. As far as starting desert islands, I can't even begin to answer that because that's not how we build societies. That's not how progress works. But we have to start with what we have today, right now.
Sure.
Did you
So
understand that?
I mean, I think it should work in both cases. I think that my system, or Liquid Zulu's system, would work in both cases. It would not run into any issues, and would be totally possible to build it up on a desert island completely. And I think that's a little bit telling. But even if we grant, like, I would also understand it. Like, I don't want to say it's impossible, that it only works on top of that, it only works from an existing society, right? Like, that it's only possible to, so that's why I'm fine with saying, okay, how would we then transition from our current society into into your society? So you said unions, right? Or worker cooperatives, right? Am I getting this correctly?
Yeah, so I gave
Okay,
you a number of different types of institutions. So it's not just one; it's all of them combined,
sure,
accumulative.
but now we getting, basically, we have to, in order for us to test that, which is what you want me to do, right? You want me to test your system. In order to test that, we have to pick one as an example and look if it's possible, right?
You have to consider it in tandem with the others.
Sure, let's pick, like, let's just pick a couple, and say, okay, they exist now, and they start evolving, right? So let's say one
Yeah,
union, let's say it's a union, and let's say it's a worker cooperative. Is there anything else?
Anarchist Federation.
What is an
Mutual
anarchist? What is that?
So an Anarchist Federation is literally just an organization of anarchists where they, 1, discuss theory, 2, discuss strategy, and 3, do outreach, 4, engage in direct action.
So it's a political.
It's like a
activist
party,
group?
but it doesn't.
It's like
It's sort of. It's like a party, but it doesn't try to take control of the state. It's not going. So the way a party works is that we have a platform, we have intentions, but they're not trying to win office. They're trying to do things. They want things done through the federation. That's what separates it from a party.
But all of these different institutions, the union, the worker cooperative, there is always more. The anarchist federation. These are all there's all multiple of those, right?
Yes.
Okay. So and now the question is, how can I, as a person, have them? They're basically the polycentric the agencies, right? That guarantee the safety of the people, right? That's their role, correct?
Yeah.
So how do I get the protection of one of these agencies, one of these groups? So for example, for a worker union, for a worker cooperative, I would just work in that same place, right?
Yeah, you'll be employed by the worker cooperative. That's one. You'll be employed by the workers' cooperative. The legal rights enforcement agency is, in most cases, a monetary payment. In a few cases, it could be more like a charity. A union would be to the same way you join a trade union today. A mutual bank is to have money invested in the bank. What else did I mention? Oh, housing cooperative. Live in a house that's run by the cooperative.
But so the moment that they start protecting my property, they also determine what is property. Do you disagree with that?
Yes. So yeah.
So how would they? Couldn't they just determine that all of my property is theirs, anyways? So what am I giving them? What am I giving them then? Basically, I'm not giving them anything, right?
Well, if they did that, then yeah, you wouldn't be giving them anything. Yeah. If they did that, but remember, we're baking that into the hypothetical. But
so
why would you go? Yeah, but why would you go to a rights? Hold on.
Yeah.
Why would you go to a rights enforcement agency that does that?
They could come to you, right?
Okay, so they come to me.
Yeah.
And what am I with them, or am I not with them?
I mean that's the thing, right? So the you paying them and them deciding what's yours and what's theirs, or what's yours and what's not yours. The payment doesn't make sense. Payment as a concept doesn't make sense, right? Like if they determine, yeah.
Okay, so my choice. So obviously, these federations, right, already exist by the time I'm choosing to join one or the other, right?
The moment they start, like let's say to a certain, at some point, we flip a switch because it's a binary, right? The switch is, we flip a switch and, sorry?
I don't like it being binary. It doesn't work.
But how would we gradually give them, like we could only gradually give them the power by making it territorial gradually. How else would we give them the power to how else would we basically take away the government, right? The law and law enforcement. We can only take it away in a binary way, right?
No, so it won't be a binary way. It'll be the law. So at the moment in the UK, we have a polylegal system. It's not polycentric; it's polylegal. So at the moment, Muslims in the UK right now, if they have tort law, so if they have disputes within tort law, they go through a Sharia court. It's an informal court. It's not. They don't go through civil courts. They go through their own made-up court. So Muslims are already doing this, and so are Jews. Jews are also doing this. I don't see why anarchists can't do it.
But
so what they're doing is what it would function as, rather than me suing you, or suing Bill or suing what, we go not to the government, and then we go to this private arbitration, basically. And then the more people do that, more and more people are doing it that way because it's hopefully becoming more popular and proving itself to be more effective, the less influence the state has. That's one way it grows. And then you end up with this counter hegemony. So that's one way you grow this framework within the state. Again, this is strategy. So this is why I don't like doing binaries where, we just switch the state off. That's not how it works. Political systems
But the
evolve
problem,
out of each other.
but would you agree that, and I'm like, would you agree that there is two components which are necessary in order for that to work? The one component is that property is still being handled by the state, and that it is not that basically people are being paid in that court as well.
Yeah, you'd need to have some kind of consensus on property or some kind of mutual understanding on property.
So property is still being handled by the state. I mean,
Yeah,
I agree that
in this transition period, yeah.
Yeah, but so, and then what I mean is that basically once you flip, and on the property case, you can then flip the switch to then give the power of the property determining who owns what. If you, the moment you give that to the court, payment doesn't make any sense anymore to that court, right?
What do you mean flipping the switch, though? Like,
I mean, at some point, yeah, you can increase the size of that court, right? That's what you mean. Like when you say gradually, the Sharia court becomes more and more important, right? So let's not talk about a real life case. Let's maybe just talk about like a theoretical court system where people have decided, because of religion or because of something, like they have decided that they prefer the judgment of that judge who's not an official judge but who's like an informal judge. They prefer that over the judge in real life, right? So they're paying that judge to arbitrate. You also have the same thing in economics. You have, like, for example, arbitration between two companies. You have that a lot, actually. Like they try not to go to court, so they go to a cheaper arbitration company, right? That's all fine and good. And the power of that company can increase and increase the more people that prefer that. But
I'm with you, yeah.
It's all on top of, it's basically a layer 2 solution. It's all on top of the layer 1 property enforcement of the state. And that is possible because you can then pay that court to handle your arbitration. But the moment you take away that property enforcement by the law, by the state, then you cannot pay these courts anymore.
Yeah, so I think this is tapping into what Sunday was trying to get at, because he was saying that there's a sense of property, not a property right, but this sense of property that exists independent of the law. And this is going to be very much in line with anarchist conceptions on usufruct. So when I say usufruct, that means mere possession, not mere possession, but like possession-based connection of an object.
You mean use?
There's already
use-based.
Yeah, it's use-based, based on you. So it's not strictly use. It's not like if I'm wearing my watch and it falls off and suddenly it's not mine. It's based on use. It's a bit of a fuzzy concept when you get to the edge cases. I agree, but this is a social theory, not an objectively discovered theory. So we've already got this sense of property. We've already got this sense of this is my house. This is what I want. And so that is how you end up with possessions. You end up with exchange goods in a very primary or primal form. And you also have quasi-currencies. And so there's already this sense of ownership outside of law. This is why.
Can you repeat that last thing? No, I want you to just repeat your last sentence. Currency, you said something about currency. Can you repeat that?
Like a quasi-currency. It's not quite a currency, but it's a quasi-currency. Like a labor voucher system or
What would that be? Like, how does that relate to use?
How would that relate to use? So it would be like, oh, I've got 50 bottle caps, and everyone's trading in bottle caps now. Like, but it's a primal form of currency. Now, currency theory, I'm not really big on, so I can't really explain how what's the word, primal currency works. I'm not a primitive currency, I should say, primitive currency. I'm not like a big anthropologist. I can't really explain how that works because we're not. I'm not building this from a desert island like Zulu is. I'm building this from the current society. We already have these concepts of currency.
Sure, you can use these
But-
concepts. It's allowed. It's allowed for you to use these concepts. Like we build it. We're not building it from the desert island, right?
What do you mean? So we're not building it from a. Yeah, so I'm saying we're not starting with a desert island.
Yeah, we're starting with
the
current
modern
society.
yeah?
Yeah,
Yeah, we're
you don't have
starting
to.
with
You,
modern society.
yeah,
And the modern society heavily influences our perceptions of property and things like this, our perceptions of morality, blah, 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 blah. And so we have this sense, even absent law, if get rid of the state, get rid of any legal system, get rid of my polycentric system, get rid of any of it. We still have this sense of possession, this sense of property, this sense of this is his stick, this is his house. So that would be one basis for a legal system to say, right, okay, we recognize your sense of that.
So you're basically taking the liquid Zulu natural law position to a certain extent.
No.
Let me tell you why. I know you will disagree, but let me explain to you why. So you think there is an underlying principle that determines what is yours and what not. And that underlying principle is usage. If you use it, it is yours. No?
That's
No?
not objectively. No. So hold on. So that is the property norm which I prefer. Right. So that is my ethical position. That's my should statement. It should be based on usury. Right. So that is what I say, and that is a anti-realist meta ethic. It's something that I'm making up. I'm not discovering it like Zulu claims to. What I was talking about a second ago.
That is a useful principle, you mean?
Yeah, it's a pragmatic. It's a useful fiction.
Useful norm.
Fiction.
Useful axiom.
Useful norm. Yeah. It's useful. It helps us get along and do things and just move on with our lives. Yeah.
Sure.
So I'm not discovering it. I'm not rationalizing it. I'm just saying, right, this is just useful for us.
I agree. I agree that that's different from Liquid Zulu's position. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it is a thing. So basically, the decision.
Is a thing.
No. The decision of who owns what is not determined by. Is determined by the state of the world, basically. So we can, if me and you are in agreement of what using something means, right? Yeah, we just have to look at the world, and we can then come to a definitive answer on who owns what. Correct?
Nearly. Okay, we come to a definitive. Wrong? So I would add, and I would emphasize adding the word "who should own what."
Sure.
Do you see how that would be carry a different meaning?
Sure, but like if this is also the way you build your law, right? We don't have to. That's why I'm always emphasizing we don't have to mix up ethics into it, because already you're proposing it for your political requests, right? That's what you want for society. So yes, that's also an ethical point, but it's not really important because now we're talking about something practical, and we ran into practical issues, and the way you solve these practical issues is by adding this useful axiom, basically, this useful rule of thumb, right? And this rule of thumb is based on the facts of the matter. So
no, this is where we're moving away from what I'm advocating. We're moving away from what I'm saying.
But I'm just trying to steal, man. Just to.
I know you are. I know you are.
Okay, then correct me what I'm getting wrong.
Yeah. So what I'm saying there's So again, this is why I really, really stress we keep to how law works, to what Thoughtbat wants out of law. Right? I will always say this. How this polycentric model works could result in laws that Thoughtbat doesn't like. Right? It can result in laws that Thoughtbat doesn't like. That's a separate question from what laws does Thoughtbat want. However, what I do say is I want the polycentric model because I predict it will produce laws which are closer to my preferences. Let me say that again. I want the polycentric model because the incentive structures allow me to predict that it will spit out laws that I want. They're not so these legal firms, they're not using Thoughtbat's ethics to arrive at how they do things. They do things according to consumer demand. They don't do it according to Thoughtbat's demand. But the way they need to negotiate with each other and the way they have a profit incentive, polycentric legal theorists like David Freeman, like Gary Chartier, like me, we predict that they lead to a more libertarian society. Does that make sense?
No, because the problem is I'm stressing this, but this is the problem. The problem is I am asking you the moment that we give the agency the power to determine who owns what completely without any basis in reality, like basically on their whim or the way they basically come to a conclusion. The moment we do that, basically we end up with the problem that there is no meaningful way of saying that you pay them because they decide who owns what. And if they do it just based on what they want, then obviously they could just say that everything you own is theirs anyways, and then you can't even pay them. But if we apply a useful axiom like yours, like the thing that you just proposed, right? If we apply that, that's why we got here. That's why we're talking about this axiom, is because we were not able to solve this paradox. And if we apply that, then all of a sudden the agency is bound by basically this principle, this axiom, and can determine. It's just like the non-aggression principle. The agencies are basically guided by this principle of non-aggression, and then they adhere. If they adhere to that thing, then you can again pay them, because all of the things that you're using, you can decide to stop using that and give it to them. So therefore, you have paid them in that moment, right? You have transferred property. Do you agree with that? That's how you get out of the problem of being able to pay the agency.
I can see how that could work, but I'm not seeing it as a problem. I'll tell you why I don't see it as a problem. It's because you agree that the government tells us what we own and what we don't own. And you agree that the international community of governments all agree on some property theory. They determine what we own, including money. And also we pay governments. We pay them. So, but I don't see how, because the institution determines what we own, means it doesn't make sense to pay them. Because we can do that now with government. We pay taxes, we buy government services. I don't see the issue.
Because we are determining what the government does by basically having a consensus and allowing that government to exist.
But the market determines what the polycentric legal order does by allowing it to exist.
The guiding principle of the current society basically is that we respect property theory. We respect basically property laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we basically. There is a certain consensus between us and the government. Otherwise, we can just overthrow that government, right? And that consensus relationship, where the government needs us and can't just do whatever it wants, that allows for the government not just being able to just take all of our money, right? They could obviously technically do that, but they're reliant on our consensus and on us basically legitimizing their power. And the same relationship doesn't exist in so the reason why they're able to take our stuff is the thing that vanishes once they start taking our stuff.
Yeah.
But
So
the
rights
same thing
enforcement
doesn't
agencies-
exist. The same thing doesn't exist in the case of the agency.
Well,
They
I would
can
say
just
it
take my
does.
stuff.
Right, I would say it does, right? So you've talked about an incentive for the state to not just take our stuff,
Mhm.
but rights enforcement agencies also have incentives, right? So rights enforcement agencies which do not deal fairly with either internally or with third-party arbitrators, they'll be having to pay out quite a lot for negotiating with other rights enforcement agencies because, again, it's a multiple agency system. Aggressive rights enforcement agencies, they're not profitable enterprises. They're constantly fighting with other people, and people who want laws to be solved peacefully and efficiently aren't going to go to them. So they're just going to evaporate. Well, not evaporate, but they're going to be worn down by the more sensible rights enforcement agencies. Those
Why?
that don't deal fairly will just lose customers, and they'll be able to secure agreements with other rights enforcement agencies.
But
They'll just be a rogue agency and not legitimized by the agencies around them.
what is the advantage of me protecting someone or me just taking their money?
So
You
if you
could do
just took
both,
their
right?
money,
So
right,
the
yes.
agency the agencies could just take all of their goods, and no one could prevent that, and no one would even like it's not even illegal because they're basically determining what's legal, right?
They don't determine what's legal on their own.
Who else is determining what's legal?
Or the entire network of rights enforcement agencies as well.
But another
Not them.
what's the
Yeah.
so they say
okay.
they say it is they come to you, an agency comes to you and says, ThoughtBat, the thing that you have on your table, it is ours now, we have decided.
Mhm.
And now that's basically there is no law in that sense, right? There is no other rule that says what they say is the rule. So then they take your stuff, or they have the option to either
Right.
take your stuff. They have the option to either take your stuff or to not take your stuff and to protect you, or to just go
Yeah.
away. And why would they? What would be the incentive for not taking your stuff or protecting
So
you?
the
It would
incentive for
be philanthropic again. Like that's why I say.
yeah.
Sorry.
The incentive the incentive for not taking my stuff is to avoid persecution by other rights enforcement agencies.
What would be the
which
incentive of
are identifying a rogue organization.
what would be the incentive of that other agency to protect you? Like in the same way that the first agency doesn't have interest in protect, like it doesn't have a direct. Why would that second agency now have that incentive of protecting you?
They have that incentive because they can claim money from the rights and from the violator. So they can say, right, okay, ThoughtBat, you have been robbed from. You're not a member of our agency, but you have been robbed from. We have agreements with all these other agencies that protect people in general from basic crimes like theft of personal property.
I don't know about these
If you come to
agreements.
us, hold on. If you come to us, we will arbitrate and we will win a claim off that rogue agency. We will take the money that they stole from you and give it back to you, and we will take money from them to pay damages.
If
And we've
they're
got this connection of other rights enforcement agencies preventing them from doing that.
if they're able to take the money from that other agency, that means they're stronger than that other agency, right?
Yeah, as a collective, yeah.
So that means that already they can take any money that they want from that other agency.
Yeah.
So why would they need the pretext? Why would they need the pretext of someone of them having stolen from someone?
Because their resources rely on them being able to their capacity to enforce laws relies on them having customers in the first place. And if they just start conflicts with other legal firms just because they want to,
Do you
they're
see
going to lose customers.
every
They're
potential
no longer just defending people's rights. They're just starting shit with other legal agencies.
You're saying
That's not a good idea.
You're saying they need customers, but every person that is a potential customer is a person to whom they have direct access to all of their property. They don't need the customer, like they don't need to do anything for the customer in order to get everything the customer owns.
Yeah.
So
how do you
why
think like the population is going to respond to just rogue? Like you got the population of a city, and I've set up my legal agency. I'm going to go around and I'm going to start preying on the innocent. I'm going to say, right, I'm not going to protect you. I'm just going to take your fucking stuff.
Yeah.
Right? What do you think the reaction of everyone else is going to be?
They're going to start their own agencies. They're going to try to stick together and try to prevent bigger mobs from basically robbing them.
Yeah, they'll form their own agencies which set out to defend. Right?
Yes,
they set out to defend.
No. Also, and also they now have the possibility of doing the same thing to other smaller units of people. So basically,
the possibility of getting into conflicts and getting
it's
into
like in jail,
like,
basically.
wars.
It's basically like in jail. You can look at jail. That's how it would be.
Well, jails are actually quite a good example of like it's not a case of everyone just scrapping all the time. Scraps happen, yeah, sure. Same with states, scraps happen. Just when the police are involved, we don't recognize that as a fight or chaos, even though that's literally what it is. But yeah, scraps happen sometimes. But there's still an order in the prison system.
There is the difference between prison. Like the reason why I'm saying that prison, you can look at prison, is that we have a bigger amount of lawlessness in prisons. I believe that's my assumption. Okay, I think that
it's full of criminals.
Yes, and also because I think that our prison system is designed to just lock away and basically only at the last resort basically intervene. But there is still a final force that intervenes and that punishes conflict, right? So it's basically it's closer to your example, to your world that we're imagining, in my opinion, but it's not quite there. So I think that, but we already see the amount of conflict that exists there and the things that we see there. And
yeah, but skewed by the fact that it's a population of people with a higher tendency towards violence.
Sure. Yeah, obviously.
You understand that, don't you?
Obviously. But that's that. It's just a basic point. Like, wouldn't you agree that at some point, like, you have like one big agency that forms, and basically this agency has zero incentive to protect someone, and only incentive, like the only incentive it would have to protect someone if taking that person in and fighting with them, that will be basically the only incentive for an agency to protect. Otherwise, it just weakens also the agency. It increases the amounts of fights it has to take of that agency for not any positive gain from that, because everything the potential customer has, they can just take anyways. So that's the first problem. Then that's why I think the only way you get. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, so if a given agency grows to such an extent where it's capable of being abusive and it just decides to be abusive, then, well, guess what? We've got cause for revolution, like we do with the state. But again, it's like the hypothetical is baked in. What does that mean? It means like the population overthrows that rights enforcement agency.
But like, there would just be one other agency.
It's already hit the fan, right? Yeah, there's one. I mean, there's one agency here that's grown in this hypothetical. It's swollen up. So it's basically a quasi-state. It just doesn't university enforce laws. And also, technically, maybe there could be competitors in future, like potential, but it's not technically a monopoly. But it's still a bloated agency which functions and looks like a state, talks like a state, may as well be a state.
I'm not even going that far.
Well, okay, that's an extreme example, right? But it's an example I get a lot when I'm talking about polycentricity. Like, oh, what if one agency was so successful it just became the government? If it's being abusive, and it's cause for revolution again. It's like, well,
No, I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying like this: the single agencies themselves, before we get a monopoly of one agency. I do agree that that would probably be the outcome, and I don't think that it would turn rogue. I think it would actually take the normal route. It would end up in a democracy, in my opinion. It would just end up in a state like, so your experiment. If we would start your experiment at some point, I think we would end up with a democracy. That's just my opinion.
Do you know what the best thing is? The best part is I would love to run that experiment.
Yeah,
with you.
I mean,
like if you join me and advocate for this experiment to be run,
but
so
there would be a lot of violence and bloodshed and in between, right? Like I think it would be horrible for like probably a couple hundred years.
So sure?
I mean, that's just the incentive structures that exist, right? Like you're not able to convince me. That's why I said game theory, because like in game theory, basically you structure your theory based on the incentives of the participants of the game, basically. And
I'm not trying to convince you. Just be clear. It's not my job. I'm defending. Right? I'm not attacking.
Sure, but isn't that your job as a seed planting? But isn't that your general? I mean, I have the job. Like my job is to convince you that your idea is bad. That's my job.
But it's not going to act. Yeah, but so when we put the phone call down, when we press that red button, we know for certain neither of us are going to go, oh yes, I'm an anarchist now, or oh yes, I'm a social democrat now. We're just planting seeds. You're planting seeds in my head, so I'll go away and I'll do some research.
Yes.
And you'll go away and maybe you'll read a few more books on polycentric legal order just because you're curious or whatever. That's my intention. My intention is for you to go, there's more to this than I thought. I'll go and read upon it.
I have a last question. I have a last thing that I want to ask you. How would like, because we had this one major thing that really got you triggered, whereas when I said that I think you're lying, I said that I rewatched our conversation, and basically the reason what I said that you were lying about was that I said that you have said that the agencies in themselves, like inside the agencies, the way that they come up with a decision, for example, so any decision that they would take, right? An agency is a group of people and they come up with some decision, right? And my question, sorry?
Internally, yeah.
Yes. So they come up with a decision on what to do as an agency, right? As a group. So, and I've said that you have said that this would be done with consensus, i.e. with voting and deciding based on a majority agreement or based on a minimum amount of people agreeing. For example, like in a democracy where it doesn't have to be like more than 50%, but it has to be the strongest opinion, like the highest percentage opinion, the opinion that gets the highest percentage in votes wins, basically. So, and you the reason why I assumed that you think that is because you were talking about confederacies, democratic confederacies that
as
were
an alternative. As
an alternative for polycentric models. But I looked up polycentric models, and democratic confederacies are a polycentric, one type of polycentric model, right? It just means that it's decentralized. And so I would like you. Do you have any other way of, like, what would be a suggestion of yours? Any other way other than democratic for an agency to come up with a decision that you think would be good for your system?
Well, that would be good. Well, another possible way would literally just be, we have an agency. This is our constitution. We are we're the employees of the agency, and we say what the law is. You, the members, don't have voting rights on that. Right? So it could be that internally. There's a preference for internal democracy. But when you were talking, so prior to you calling me a liar, we were talking about democracy across a society. At least that's what I thought we were talking about. That's why I was saying, no, I don't care about consensus in a broad sense of society, but you want to have some kind of agreement between people internally, of course.
So, quick question.
So, go on.
So now you've basically said that it would be a core of members, like basically an aristocracy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the members, these aristocrats, how would they come up with decisions?
It could be on a whim.
Okay,
they come up with it however.
But if they could be, they could also disagree, right? I mean,
And
it's
they could
just.
disagree, you know?
I mean,
they could disagree, and if a disagreement is so bad that they can't cohabit, then the agency splits. You know, this happens in federations all the time.
So,
yeah, that could happen.
So they would not vote on it. They would rather split than vote on it.
Yeah, but it's up to them how they organize it. It's not for me to say yes, they will do this. Yes, they'll. Like, in the debate we had, you said I was being slippery. So I don't have a position on it. Like, all I'm saying is, I want multiple non-territorial agencies.
I think that
the internal structures of each one is not entailed by the view.
Sorry, can you repeat that last thing?
So the internal structures of these given agencies is not entailed by the view. I don't hold a position on it. I'm more my view is like, well, if we had such a society where we have all these competing legal agencies, and the most successful ones were internally democratic, or the most successful ones were like aristocratic, I don't mind. I don't care. It's like, well, it's up to people what they choose to go with. Like, it's up to the market. It's like if I was to say, oh, let's have a market. Just let me make this point. It's like if I said, let's have a market for Indian cuisine, and then you say, well, will they have sous chefs in their kitchens? They have 2 sous chefs in the kitchens, and I'm like, well, I don't know. It's up to them. You know what I mean?
So yeah, but the reason why I'm asking is the thing that I was trying to explain also in the debate with in the conversation with Sunday, is that so there is, in my opinion, there is just 2 options, and we've basically also, I think we're in agreement about that. So there is obviously the option of the agency internally deciding democratically, right? That is one option. And then there is the second option, which ends up being on a whim, because like if there is a sorry,
I'm just making noises because I'm
sure.
bending down to pick things up.
So the second option is just whim. And the reason, that was also something that we talked about in the last conversation. I believe that the reason why you have a polycentric model and agencies, and I have a state, and Liquid Zulu has the NAP and bounty hunters and stuff like that, is to avoid the whim. That's
not my position.
That the whim happens. Because
it's not my position.
Okay, sure, but practically, that was my assumption. That's what I know. You saying now that's not what I want. Okay, but that was the question that I tried to ask you the whole time in the debate with Sunday, was if that's the case. You can say no to that, but the thing is, I think that you end up with the same situation, and my question now would be, if it's on a whim, if it's not democratic, let's put democratic to the side. Let's say it's the internal decisions of that agencies are always being done on a whim. How is that better than us just removing the agencies and just having
it probably wouldn't. It probably, if they were always doing it on a whim, it probably wouldn't be better. No, I agree.
Okay, great,
right?
Great. So
but
actually,
hold on. But let me explain. The whim part isn't the bad part, right? So that it's not bad that it's a whim. The bad part is the expected consequences, right? So when we're doing when we're doing political theory and political science, we're looking for predicted consequences.
Not necessarily.
Bad consequences. Well, that's what science is doing.
If it's consequentialist, if it's a consequentialist view, yes. But other than that, no.
It's not. It's right.
That's not how Liquid Zulu looks at it.
I'm aware. I know that's not how Liquid Zulu. I'm aware that you're not quite like you said in the Liquid Zulu conversation. You hate terminology. I'm not going to drag you through the bush with that. But honestly, it's not consequentialism, but it sounds like it.
Bro, you should be able to explain it to me if I don't know the terminology. Okay, sure, and I think it's also your job. It's also your job to explain it to people. I'm sure that I'm not the only one that doesn't know every term.
Fine, I'll explain.
So yeah, and you shouldn't hide behind these words as well.
Well, yeah, this is why I try to define legal and ethical and, the three senses of property, which people sometimes use and all that. But anyways, so my preference for the polycentric legalist firm is based on my egoistic position that I want to have a society where conflict is minimized. I want fewer conflicts. I want fewer people hindering my life. My prediction is that the polycentric model will do that better than a state will, because the state is also muddling in as well. Not just criminals, but the state is doing so as well. It's not quite consequentialism, because consequentialism.
Wait, one question. What is no? But you have to. It's just a question. You can continue.
Okay.
What is the state? Also, the state is also acting on a whim. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the state can. Yeah, the state ultimately acts on whims. Yeah.
Not my state. Like in a democracy, I don't think the state is acting on a whim.
75% of people don't know who their local MP is. They're acting on whims.
Yeah. But it's a collective whim, in a sense. Like I agree that there is some whimness to it, but since it is collective, it is definitely less whim than just one person deciding. So a king is way more whim than a group voting on it, right?
I don't agree with that at all.
Really?
No, I don't.
You think it's more whim? You think it's more whim, or it's equal whim?
Equal.
A monarchy or a democracy?
Yeah, bro, it's equal. Like
that's crazy.
It's not entailed, right? Because it's not entailed by the fact that there's a monarch or there's a democracy, whether or not the law is whimsical or not.
So you would be fine with the democracy, with the monarchy?
No. So we're talking about whims versus non-whims. So imagine. Can I just explain, please?
Sure.
Right. A monarch could be a philosopher king, right? He could have the perfect ethical theory. He could have the perfect this, that, and the other. He knows why he wants to impose this policy. He has perfect reasons why he wants to ban homosexuality and things like that. That's a joke. He has all these wonderful reasons, non-whims, as to why he wants to impose his laws. Then we have a democracy. And imagine this democracy is people voting for things and they don't know why they're voting for it. The democracy is more whimsical here than the monarch. So that's why I'm not. That is why I don't say, "Oh, a democracy is more whim than a monarchy," or "a monarchy is more whim than a democracy."
When I say more whim, I mean on average, statistically. Like that's what I would expect if I would have 1 million kings and 1 million democracies. I would expect less whim. I agree that obviously we can have a very, very rational king. Like obviously, of course, 100% agreed. But I'm just saying, like in the same way, because I agree with you, because you just said that in political science, what we do is we look at it like statistically and scientifically. We try to predict what would happen, right? And I agree with that concept. I didn't disagree that I don't think that, but I would disagree that that's always the case for all political scientists, like of all political theory. I think that political theory can also go by other metrics, but I agree with that metric. And by that metric, just by predicting what would be less whim, I would expect 1 million democracies to produce less decisions based on whim than 1 million monarchies. That's my point.
I hold the opposite view.
Okay, honestly, interesting. And does that translate to you advocating for, if it's the opposite, would you advocate for monarchy if you couldn't have like anarchy? Would you prefer a monarchy to democracy?
No, I wouldn't prefer monarchy to democracy.
Why not?
There'd be other flaws. So class division would be one flaw. Also, veil of ignorance. I wouldn't want to be someone under a monarch.
What's bad about class division?
Class division is unstable. So it's setting itself up to fail. It incentivizes further conflict. It incentivizes revolutions. And
When
such,
you say it's
especially
unstable,
when
you say it would be it would not hold. It would go away.
No, I'm meaning like unstable. Like an unstable society is one where we can't make social predictions, and there's increased conflicts occurring. So we don't know what the law will be tomorrow. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. It's not predictable. It's chaotic. It's not orderly, and that would definitely be the case with an educated and also technologically gifted populace, as opposed to like just peasants shifting around mud like in the feudal times, which allowed for monarchies. The lack of technology allowed for monarchies. It's why we don't really have proper monarchies anymore, proper feudal societies anymore. So that's one reason why I wouldn't want monarchy over democracy. But when I'm talking more in like terms of like whims, whether or not a decision would be more whimsical or rational, I would expect the monarchy to be more rational, because monarchs, as they are getting older, they are being trained and educated in political theory as they grow up. They're told about how laws work, how this works, how that works, what's good, what's bad. They're given that, they're just beamed with education. Yeah, you'll get famous examples like Nero or Henry VIII where they do bad shit, but overall they tend to be quite predictable. Whereas democracies are run by a population, and that population is rationally ignorant. I keep bringing up this term, rational ignorance. It means if you vote, and that vote is only 1 out of 36 millionth of a say, as it is on the UK, you are not incentivized to do any political research behind your vote. That is why, in the UK, 75% of people don't know their local MP. These people are not voting based on rational decisions. They're voting based on sound bites, popularism, whatever the media says, shitty arguments that Ben Shapiro destroys, these kinds of nonsensical, irrational shit. That is what people are voting for. Polycentricity solves this problem of rational ignorance because it gives the individual person a much greater say on what laws they subscribe to. Because I don't have to move a muscle. I can just pick that one, pick that one, pick one. I'm choosing. My choices have a much greater impact on my life, and therefore I'm far more incentivized to rationally think about it. I'll be looking up at these policies. I'll be looking at their effects, their consequences. I'll be looking at the effectiveness of the legal firm itself to deliver law. Whereas this isn't the case in democracies. No one knows what the government's doing, really. They don't know shit about political theory. They don't know shit about like politicians' voting records. They don't know shit about parties' manifestos. They don't read them. They're not incentivized to read them because their say is negligible. What, you have 1 out of 36 millionth of a say every 5 years in the UK. Really? That's not engaging. And it isn't, because people don't know shit about politics.
Wait. Before you go further, so
I am getting tired, but
yeah, sure. Let's close this. Let's finish this up.
Let's close it up.
But let me just say one last thing. I feel like I run into the same issue. I don't know if you've seen it, but I've had a very nice conversation. Like after our stream, I've had a conversation with an Ayn Rand fan, like a PhD who's also a fan of Ayn Rand. And
my girlfriend watched it. I didn't.
Okay, cool. And it was a really good conversation. It was similar to this conversation right now. And so I feel like the problem that I'm running into is that I'm asking questions about incentives, and I feel like the structure you're proposing is setting it up such that there is no incentive to be good. So no necessary incentive to be good to a certain extent. And I believe that in a monarchy, as you've pointed out correctly, the class division is so high that the power is so concentrated. Obviously, there has to be a minimal amount of things that a monarch gives to its people, but the incentive is way lower. The incentive to make the people feel good is way lower, I think, than in a democracy where people, and obviously democracies have their flaws. I agree with that, but I would rather fix like the theoretical model of the democracy. If I look at the theoretical model of the democracy, and if I compare it to the theoretical model of the monarchy or the polycentric model, I feel like the democracy is in theory the best model because it incentivizes good behavior in theory, as long as no one is tricking the system. And the tricking the system could happen in the monarchy as well. We could have like someone who is being elected, who is king, who is getting like tricked by someone, and like there is obvious ways of corrupting also the monarch, right?
Yeah.
So I'm defending democracy, not by the current way it is. I'm rather defending it from a theoretical standpoint. I'm also comparing it to your system in a theoretical way. I'm looking at your system through a theoretical lens as well. It's not a practical lens that it's not a real life thing that we're looking at.
Yeah. So I understand those criticisms. I hear them quite a lot. They're very natural criticisms to have. It's a very weird system I'm putting forward. I understand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave you with 2 book recommendations.
Sure.
One is going to be David Freeman's Machinery of Freedom, because he puts it nice and simply. And the second is going to be, I'll put these in chat.
Mm-hmm.
The second is going to be Gary Chartier's Anarchy and Legal Order, which is a far more textbook Cambridge. It's produced by Cambridge, a textbook anarchist legal theory. So David Freeman is the easy read, the light reading. Gary Chartier is the heavy reading, and in that they talk about incentive structures. They talk about they try and answer the problems that you've been raising.
Sure.
As a mouthpiece, all I can do is just respond to them as I can think of on the top of my head and all the rest of it. But yeah, to round it off, so I want to round it off with a sweet note. I know you and we had a bit of a spit and a spat. There's no bad feelings on my part. You seem like a decent guy. I wish you well. There's no issues in terms of like ill feelings. No hard feelings. Let's put it that way. From my end.
Same here, absolutely.
But I think tonight was, 1, entertaining, especially when Sunday was in the room, and 2, we've definitely had a more fruitful conversation following on from that.
Yes,
I think that gives a little bit of a. It's a weird thing that it's like it sort of pissed you and Sunday off to the point where you and I are chill now. So
I mean, yeah. I was really disappointed in Sunday's moderation because I feel like he was not interested in the topic. I feel like Liquid Zulu would have been really, really good for the conversation because he understands your position, I think, very well. And I think Sunday didn't even understand the terminology that we were using, which is dumb of my part that I assumed that he would. And he was basically just loading every word that we were using with his own views, and it was basically impossible to have a conversation about it. But yeah, I don't know how entertaining it was. I don't like derailments like that. I feel like, to me personally, the last 1 hour was way more entertaining than the first. I like Sunday's persona that he's like portraying sometimes. It can be funny, but it should be like a good balance between like derailment, funniness, and a fruitful conversation. But yeah, anyways, I'm still thankful for him for taking the time. It's cool, but yeah.
I prefer conversations like this, but if they don't go like this, I say at least they were entertaining.
Yes.
But yeah, yes. At least they're funny. You know,
maybe at some point, Liquid Zulu and you can reconcile, and that would be a really great conversation, I think.
Yeah, that's a weird thing with him, but it's honestly it's down to him.
I mean, I don't want to talk about it on stream, but yeah,
I don't have an issue with Zulu. Zulu's got the issue with me, so yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah,
just down to him. But anyways,
okay, man. Have a good night. Thanks for being on. And Dankeschön.
Dankeschön.
Ciao, ciao.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Wiedersehen. Nice. Okay. yeah, the first hour was obviously a big waste of time. But it was also interesting. I mean, I guess it's an experience to have the moderator derail the conversation. And it was also sometimes funny. I agree. Yeah, that's it. I don't know when the next stream is. I have one stream planned with someone from the far right. I think it's going to be really, really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to having him on. I hope I can make it happen in the next weeks. And yeah, I wish everyone a good night. Bye bye.